He played this game hundreds of times, knew every secret, every hidden item, every ending, and then one day he logs in. No character selection, no warning. He reincarnates as the most useless demon prince, a background character who's guaranteed to die in the battle for the demon throne. So instead of panicking, he rejoices. Worst spawn and best opportunities. He abuses everything he knows, hunts down hidden rewards, builds alliances with key characters, and uses a broken mechanic. Getting attacked equals gaining skills, slowly turning a doomed side character into something the original story never planned for. Some time ago, MC was running down the street. His name is Juingong. His parents named him that in the hopes that he would become an influential person. In Korean, his name means main character. He ran into a store and a guy screamed, "Juingong." The man smiled and said, "There he is." Of course, people had made fun of his name since childhood, but he didn't care. He really wants to become the main character. He looked at the guy with displeasure and told him to stop laughing. He asked, "Is there a game?" The guy laughed and said, "I put it aside for him." A remake of Night Saga Re. It's a story about humans and demons, a game in which he chooses one of two characters, the hero Locke or the heir to the Demon King, Zephyr Ragnaros, and travels the world completing quests. He completed the game more than 10 times as a child, so he knows all about it. Besides, this is the first game released in VR. After some time, Ingong came home and inserted the flash drive into the helmet. He put it on his head and sat in a chair. MC smiled and said that today he would not be long. He would play for about 8 hours. After some time, he opened his eyes and looked around. He asked, "Is he in the game?" It's not the beginning if he hasn't woken up in bed. But who is this character? A voice came from the street. Is he still sleeping? The orc looked inside and told him to come out. Did he forget what he had to do? MC cried out in surprise. The graphics are cool, as if everything was real. The orc asked again. Graphics, MC thought. Can he communicate? He doesn't remember this in the advertisement. He asked, "Okay, what's his name?" The orc asked, "What, has he already forgotten?" "Karak." MC asked, "Karak?" He walked towards the exit and said, "Everyone is waiting for him, Prince Shatra, so hurry up." MC said, Shatra Ignis, the 9th son of the Demon King? He hasn't chosen a hero yet. Why? He waved his hand and said, he needs to open the status window. He looked at the system window and said, there, he should play as Prince Shatra first. Even a regular NPC has at least 10 points in each stat. What's wrong with him? He's a prince. He'll look at the skills. MC looked at this puzzledly and asked, Conquest and main character settings. He thought, do main character settings mean what he thinks? Karak looked into the tent and ordered them to go out. Shatra answered, he's coming. He went outside and looked around and saw several more orcs. He asked Karak, what's going on? It's like a war is starting. Karak told him to go and not talk nonsense. We need to destroy the Crimson Light idiots. MC screamed, what? Karak screamed, this is their first fight. They're starting. Shatra screamed, stop. Fight? What about the training? So, the Crimson Light orc tribe created an army to organize a rebellion. Does that mean he needs to deal with the 7th prince and 8th princess? MC asked. Are they going to war 10 at a time? Karak answered. He said they were just patrolling today. MC asked again, right? Karak asked, what's wrong with him? He's acting weird. Shatra waved his hand and opened the system window. He thought he knew there was a minimap. Everything is much more convenient now. He will always keep it open. He said there's a hidden part here. Is this an event? So they'll be walking for a long time. Follow him. He knows a shortcut. Karak looked at him, puzzled, but everyone followed him. The orcs climbed the stone wall and MC stopped and looked at the stone doors. Karak asked in surprise, how did he find this place? Is he a mage? MC answered, if only. Karak asked, is he okay? He looks tired. Shatra thought. He didn't know the first level was so hard. He said to see if the door would open. Suddenly, he felt a surge of strength and asked, what? The system window reported that his level had increased. MC said, that can't be. He leveled up just by walking. His stats also increased by 2 points, plus 2 extra points. It's crazy. Karak turned around and asked, what is he doing? He needs to go. MC replied, yes, he's going. He thought, I don't know what could be there, but at least he's not alone. Besides, the protagonist has plot protection. They went inside and Karak said, apparently this cave was dug by dwarves. MC asked again, dwarves? He thought they didn't exist. Karak replied, not anymore, but they used to be. Shatra asked, did they all move to the demon realm? Karak replied, I don't know. He'd only heard about them. He looked at the things ahead in surprise, and the orcs rushed toward them and joyfully shouted, treasures! The stupid dwarves left their weapons behind. They need to take everything they can carry. The orcs laughed joyfully, and MC walked up to it and looked around. The system windows reported, too low a level, not enough strength, not enough magic. He said, but he'll take it anyway. They'll see how much he can fit in his inventory. MC said, take it. He looked at his inventory and said, you just need to touch it and think. He loudly ordered to run. The orcs turned around, when suddenly the wall in front of them broke and stones flew in all directions. Kaishin, the general of the Crimson Light tribe, asked, did they think they wouldn't recognize him? He ordered to kill them. The red orcs rushed to the attack and started hitting the green orcs. MC looked at it and asked, what should he do? Take the kills and get experience? He swung his sword and smashed it on the orc's head. Shatra looked at the fragment, puzzled, and the orc turned around and growled in displeasure. MC started to run, but tripped over a rock and fell to the ground. The system window reported that he had 1 health point left. He cried out in fear, and the orc swung his hand. MC continued to scream loudly, but Karak appeared in front of him and shouted, Prince, he needs to run. Shatra said, Karak, He stood up and thought, his hands still shaking. It's just a game. He said, he can't. That's enough for today. The system window asked, return to the menu? MC said, it's too realistic and creepy. He looked at the system window and thought, what? Why is there no way out? Does that mean he's stuck here? Kaichin stepped forward and, noticing him, held out his staff. He swung and MC screamed, no, he can't die. Magic pierced his body and threw him back. He sighed and closed his eyes as his health points dropped to 0. He moved to another space and asked, where is he? He was definitely killed by orcs. Does that mean he died? He saw a bright glow in front of him and a voice said, he is destined to be here, to conquer, enslave, and rule. The girl extended her hand to him and MC asked, what? At that moment, the battle in the cave continued. Kaichan smirked and said, who would have thought that there would be so few of them? Are they arrogant or just stupid? There is no time. Let him kill them all. After a while, Kshatriya opened his eyes and asked, what was that? Awakening? Kaichan asked, is he still alive? The system window reported that he received level 1 telekinesis. MC looked at this in surprise and asked, what? When did he learn that? He saw the subclass and asked, Conqueror Knight. Kaichan screamed. What are they doing? Let them kill them already. Karak asked, Prince? He ordered the orcs to protect the prince. The prince must not be harmed. Kshatriya clenched his fist and looked at the system window. He thought, but the Conqueror Knight is not on the list of classes available to a knight. Why then? He stuck the rest of his sword into the ground and thought, as if he already knew everything. Spells echoed in his head. He said, the power of conquest shall be the power of a king. Under the royal banner, the orcs' bodies were covered in mana and the system window reported, conquest skill. Under the royal banner, level 1. In a limited area, this grants a positive effect to allies. The orcs shouted joyfully, they have become stronger. They need to kill them. They rushed forward and began to attack the red orcs. Kaichan screamed, what the hell? They have become stronger. This is some kind of nonsense. He looked around and asked, is that him? Kaichan ran towards MC and shouted, idiot, make him stop this immediately. Kshatriya looked at him and encouraged Karak. He shot mana towards Kaichan and he screamed, wait a minute. Karak cut off the enemy's head and the red orcs saw it and screamed in fear. The orcs said they were running away. They mustn't let them get away. The system window reported, the general's merits are attributed to the king. His level has increased. Kshatriya smiled and asked why his level. Karak looked at his hand and asked, what kind of power is this? He wondered, is it thanks to the prince? After a while they returned to their camp. MC was sitting in the tent and saying, it's gone. He still couldn't find it. There is no exit button in the menu. Calm down. He needs to calm down. There are two options. First, he's stuck in virtual reality. Perhaps there was a bug? Then everything will be fixed in the update. Or, it sounds crazy but this is not a game but reality. Like in novels and comics, he ended up in the game world. Or this world is his very real past, NPCs that can change. And most importantly, he looked at his pants and said, no censorship. What if this really is another world? Is he supposed to die here? No, he can't risk that. At least he's not an orc or an ogre. He's a prince now. He was born with a golden spoon in his mouth. Karak entered the tent and asked, Prince, does he have a minute? MC turned around and asked, Karak? After a while, he asked why he suddenly asked for a sparring match. Karak replied, he will be his leader. Knowing his skill level will help him prepare. MC asked, is this really necessary? He caught the wooden sword that Karak threw him and told him not to worry. He would try to restrain himself. Kshatriya laughed and told him to look at himself. And this is what he was saying to the prince? He rushed to attack and shouted, if he wants to fight, then he should fight seriously. Karak gripped the sword and thrust it forward. Kshatriya tried to attack him but only swung the sword nearby. Karak smirked and imagined it like an egg smashing against a stone. He pushed MC away and he screamed loudly, falling to the ground. Kshatriya grabbed his head and Karak asked, is he okay? MC asked, come on, why hit him so hard? The system window reported that basic sword mastery level 1 was obtained. Kshatriya thought, he got sword mastery? When? His eyes widened and thought, right, it's like telekinesis. He gets skills when he gets hit. Karak told him to finish and go their separate ways. MC asked, who said it was the end? Karak looked at him questioningly, and Kshatriya said he was just getting started. He gripped his sword and charged. Karak thought he had gotten much better at moving, but why was he so bad at the beginning? His skills couldn't have suddenly improved. He swung his sword and tried to attack MC, but MC quickly dodged. Kshatriya asked, so how is it? Not bad, huh? Karak, what level is he? Karak answered that when he checked he was level 21. MC spoke, 21. Well, he'll catch up soon. He looked at the system window, where it said he was level 7. Everyone in this world has levels. Not everyone can immediately recognize it like he did. It's necessary to use a level estimation spell. In general, the ability to see stats and improve them is a big advantage. MC pushed off the ground and charged. He landed in front of Karak and thought, he can get stronger. No, he can get stronger much faster than the others. The Demon Arc in the Night Saga tells the story of Zephyr and how he surpassed his siblings and became the Demon King. There are many episodes until the end, but the most important one is the forced event, Killing Day. It takes place in the year 517, when Zephyr kills all his siblings to achieve his goal. The keyword is all, which means him too. It is now the year 512. He still has a couple of years. He needs to prevent this. The best way is to become stronger than Zephyr. After some time, MC was sitting on a log in the forest, and Karak came out of the bushes and asked, Prince, what is he doing here? He's been looking for him everywhere. Shitra asked again. What happened? Karak asked. Did he forget that today is a meeting? MC asked again. A meeting? Karak said. Rather, everyone is waiting. He looked at him questioningly, and after a while he was already sitting at the table and laughing. He said, they're early. Chris Moonlight, the 7th prince, asked why he was so polite. They were brothers, after all. Caitlin Moonlight, the 8th princess, answered, but this was their first meeting. Chris said, it's okay. Let him call them by their names. Shutra replied, okay. He thought about it. They were the children of Elaine Moonlight, the 4th queen and queen of the lycanthropes. In the game, they were also a lot of trouble. But a year before the assassination, they died at the hands of Zephyr and the other children of the Demon King. And all because of the secret of Caitlin Moonlight's birth. She's a bastard. Caitlin asked why he decided to fight them without a plan. She told him to patrol. MC replied, well, he didn't know they were there. Caitlin asked to take a look. Is he injured anywhere? Shatra looked at her questioningly and she began to examine him. Caitlin said he was the weakest of them and he should be careful. MC wondered why she was so worried. When were the Demon King's children so close? Chris said, oh my. If he takes such a risk again, he'll get a reprimand. MC smiled and replied, okay. He wondered what was going on. Are they kind? There are a lot of mana users among lycanthropes, probably because of the abundance of life force. If he gains skills in the same way, maybe he can learn to use mana like that too. Shatra said he had a request for them. Can they hit him with aura? They looked at him puzzled and asked, what? After a while, the orcs were fighting each other. The red orcs were screaming loudly and trying to attack. The monster turned around and hit another one, and then ordered to kill them. Whoever kills the most will receive a reward. MC appeared in another space again, and saw the girl. He said, she. He looked around and asked, who are they? He doesn't remember such characters. The girl appeared behind him and a bright glow illuminated him. Shatra opened his eyes while lying on the bed. He grabbed his head and asked, was it a dream? Karak came up to him and asked, did he wake up? MC screamed in fear. He scared him. Karak replied, I think he's fine. Why did he ask the princess to hit him? He whined, and now let him see what happened. The system window reported that he received a level 1 aura. Shatra said, he feels the aura. Karak asked, did he awaken the aura when he was hit with it? MC answered, something like that. Karak asked, is that why the energy awakened in him when he fought the flames of crimson light? MC answered, yes. Karak answered, I see. Shatra asked, did anything happen while he was sleeping? Karak answered, of course. The main forces defeated the Crimson Light tribe. MC asked again, the main forces? He thought Chris, Caitlin, and he were the only ones who could destroy the Crimson Light tribe. Karak replied, that can't be. He knows how big this tribe is. Shatra asked, then who was in command? Karak replied, General Bandel. MC asked, what? Bandel? General Bandel. He's one of the strongest here. That's why he really liked him when he played for Zephyr. Wait, this could be his chance. Bandel becomes Zephyr's subject in 515. He doesn't obey him yet, which means he can take him first. He knows everything he needs to know about him, what rewards he likes, his favorite food, his talents. But the main thing that will lure him to him is winning a duel. If he knows that much, he can get Bandal as a subordinate before Zephyr. He needs to try. Besides, there's plenty of time, so Bandal, he will be his. After a while, a shout was heard in the Caitlin camp. What? Chris shouted. Did he reach the first level of aura in a day? MC thought, well, of course, he put all the points into aura. It wasn't a hasty decision. Aura enhances all abilities. It's better than telekinesis. Chris said it's impossible. Is it because he's a Gandharva? Shatra, can he create underground maps? MC asked again. Underground maps? He thought, no, but he has a mini-map. He said, it's simple. Can he give me a pencil and a piece of paper? After a while, Chris said, this is incredible. This is more of his. Shatra, he's a genius. MC laughed, and Caitlin said, all those guys from the Crimson Light are dead. The tribe doesn't know that they know about their underground tunnels. Chris said, it might be possible to set up an ambush for them. Since it came to that, he wanted to ask him one more thing. Shutra? He looked at him questioningly, and after a while, Karak asked, does that mean they need to patrol the area again? MC replied, there's no choice. He's the youngest in the family. Karak said, it's good that they have reinforcements. Shutra replied, it's all thanks to their hard work. Karak laughed lightly and said, exactly. Suddenly they stopped, and MC asked, sister, what's with the cloak? She put her finger to her lips to keep him quiet. She said she was secretly following him. Just in case. If he was in danger, she would intervene. She needed his achievements. Shatra wondered, would she support him? Was she crazy? He asked again. Achievement? The girl said she was very pleased. She was Sarah, the adjutant. MC responded, reciprocating. She said they would cover him, no need to worry. Shatra replied, okay. After a while they entered the cave, and MC asked why the caves were empty. Karak replied, who leaves valuables? Apparently, the dwarves took everything. Shatra asked, but what about the weapons they found last time? Karak replied, apparently they didn't consider them valuable. MC said, apparently. They walked on, and Karak said, Prince, he thinks someone is coming. Shatra replied, yes, he hears it too. He looked at his mini-map and said, it looks like them. He opened his inventory and thought, he took the flash spell just in case. And this. He took it out and ordered Karak to tell everyone to close their eyes on command. Karak looked at him questioningly, and huge spiders crawled towards them. Stone spiders are monsters that often appear in caves. They live in dozens. Their poison paralyzes. MC ordered everyone to close their eyes. He threw the potion into the air, and it exploded. A bright glow illuminated the cave, and the creatures squealed loudly. Shutra thought. Stone spiders are helpless in the light because they live in the darkness. He ordered to attack to kill the spiders. The orcs rushed into battle and began to attack the spiders. MC stood behind him thinking, stone spiders hunt in groups and each group needs a leader. MC shouted, Karak, follow him. They'll deal with the leader. Karak replied, okay, ran forward and stopped in front of a huge monster. Karak screamed loudly and swung his axe. He quickly began attacking the creature, then widened his eyes in surprise. He cried out, what? The shell is so strong. MC said, exactly. He'd completely forgotten. He thought the axe wouldn't penetrate the exoskeleton. It's vulnerable to fire, but he can't use magic yet. The creature growled and opened its huge, toothy mouth. Shutra ordered Karak to use fire. Karak asked again, but where would he get fire? At that moment, a cry rang out. Shutra let him raise his sword. Bright fiery mana infused his sword, and he joyfully asked, magic? Caitlin asked, is that enough? MC cried out, sister? The creature extended its sharp paw toward him, and Shutra frowned and rushed into battle. He used the flaming blade and attacked the spider. He became covered in mana, and the system window reported that his level had increased. The character window opened in front of him, and Shutra joyfully said, level 9. Caitlin asked, Shutra, how is he? The other world. MC replied, it is. It's some kind of blessing. Such things happen. No need to worry. Caitlin asked, blessings? Is he a Gandharva? Shutra replied, yes, from a Gandharva. She asked, what's more important? Has he fought these creatures before? He has great reflexes. MC replied, well, he just read about them, that's all. He thought about it. He's fought them many times. Of course he knows everything about them. Karak pointed his finger forward and told the prince to look. MC turned around and Karak said he thinks there's some kind of door there. They opened it a little and went inside. MC looked surprised and asked, is this a city portal? Karak asked, does he know what this is? Shutra replied, not exactly, but he has an idea. He looked around and thought, he thinks these are dwarven patterns. He never saw such patterns while playing as Zephyr, but he encountered this a couple of times while playing as the hero. He thinks if you pour mana into it, it will activate. MC turned around and said, maybe this is a portal. Caitlin removed the hood from her head and asked again, a portal? Sarah said, judging by the appearance, the prince might be right. Caitlin asked, how do I know where this leads? Sarah replied, I need to look for some inscriptions. Karak approached the sign and told the prince to come here. He thought he saw something engraved here. MC looked at him thoughtfully and approached with Caitlin. She said these were clearly not demonic writings. They looked like dwarven letters. Karak asked if she could read them. Caitlin spread her hands and asked why she knew dwarven. And she, Sarah, she apologized she didn't know either. MC said, portal number 2, the Gishkov Mountains, and it connected to portal number 3. MC looked at it questioningly and asked, what? He could read dwarven. The system window reported that he had acquired the skill, dwarven language level 1. He thought, what? He wondered, can he learn languages like that too? Karak asked. Prince, can he read this? Shutra answered. Apparently, yes. Caitlin asked. Shutra, since when does he know dwarven? Sarah asked, what is written below? MC said, he thinks it activates if you fill it with mana. He turned around and asked Caitlin, could she pour some in? She asked again, why her and not him? MC replied, well, he hasn't quite gotten the hang of it yet. He thought he doesn't know how to use magic at all. Caitlin replied, okay. She walked up to the portal and poured mana into it. It glowed brightly and created a hologram. Someone asked, are these the Gish Mountains? This point is their location, and this one is portal number 3. Does that mean there are dwarven tunnels there too? That's quite possible. Karak asked, is that good? After all, the main forces of the Crimson Flame are located just in front of these mountains. Shutra replied, exactly. That way they can hit them from behind. He suggested going back. He needs to discuss everything with his brother. Everyone replied, okay. After a while, a loud scream was heard in the camp. Who would have thought that there was a portal in such a place? Shutra, he's incredible. MC replied, no, just. Chris asked him to tell him if he suddenly needed anything. He would help if it was in his power. Shutra replied, oh well. Chris said no. As the leader and his older brother, he wanted to reward him. He would be offended if he refused. MC smiled and asked, is it okay if it's something unreasonable? Chris asked again, unreasonable? Now he was even more curious. Shutra asked if he could teach him the beast god's hand-to-hand combat art. Chris widened his eyes in surprise and asked, what? Because of Shutra's level, he can't properly wield weapons, but techniques are different. The beast god's hand-to-hand combat art is a martial art that has been passed down in the royal family of lycanthropes from generation to generation. In short, it's a powerful S-rank martial art. He knows it's a strange request. He'll understand if he refuses. MC folded his arms and asked, is that too difficult? Okay? He thought so right away. Chris replied, okay, he'll teach him. Of course, he can't teach him secret techniques. MC happily asked, really? Chris replied, but he'll at least teach him aura. So what? Is he okay with it? Why is he silent? Does he disagree? Shutra shouted joyfully, no, everything is great. Chris asked, Shutra, can he consider him a brother now? MC asked again, brother? He thought, brother? It's a very important word, okay? He doesn't see anything wrong. He even likes it. He shook his hand and said yes. He looked at Chris and Caitlin and mentally suggested that they work together. The system window reported, an alliance was created with Chris Moonlight and Caitlin Moonlight. Alliance status, normal. Sometime later, in the Crimson Light tribe camp, an orc said she wouldn't have come here if she'd originally intended to target this place. Princess. What brought her here? The 6th princess, Felicia Doomblade, was sitting bound on the ground. At that moment, Shutra looked at the system window and said, Charisma. When he first gained a level, all stats increased by 2, but at some point, Charisma started increasing by only 1. Why is that? In the original, Charisma and Appearance were different stats. Appearance affects how attractive a character is, and Charisma is how much others will like a character. MC said there must be something to it, because he's been developing well so far. Besides, he'll soon reach level 10. In the game, when Zephyr and Locke reach level 10, their unique skills, Scion of Darkness and Chosen One, improve by 1 level. Shitra asked if he also reached level 10. Would one of his skills improve as well? Karak looked into the tent and said, Prince, everything is ready. Are they leaving? MC turned around and answered, yes. Karak said, he's in the mood today. Did something good happen? Shitra answered, no, not really. He went out to the orcs and said, okay, it's time to move. After some time inside the cave, the orcs and wolves were moving forward. The demons entered the hall with the portal and Chris asked, have they finished the investigation? The wolf answered, yes. As he said, this portal is connected to the Eska River in the Gishkov Mountains. Chris asked, does that mean it works? The wolf answered, yes, and it's strong, which is typical for dwarves. Chris said, then they're going. The wolves activated the portal and MC thought, he can't believe he's seeing the gate in person. Caitlin turned around and asked, what is he waiting for? Shatra answered, yes, he's coming. They entered the portal and were transported to the mountain. Chris said, good. As they expected, the camp is here. Judging by their size, there are about 5,000 of them. If they attack from the rear, they can gain the advantage. If General Bandal starts attacking from the front to distract them, then their spies will burn their supplies. Sarah said, but something is wrong. There are too few people in the camp. Chris said she is right. Where did they go? Maybe they have already started attacking. MC looked to the side and asked, what is that? It sounds like the sounds of a battle. Chris said, Shutra. Have him focus his aura on his eyes. Shutra asked, aura? He frowned and said, he sees. Caitlin asked, it looks like the Crimson Light tribe is on one side, but who are the others? Chris replied, they are not General Bandal's people. No fighting was planned. MC said, besides, the fight is not small. He saw a girl and asked, are there dark elves? Caitlin asked again, what? He said, dark elves? Shutra answered, yes, they are smaller and fight on dragons. She asked again, on dragons? Chris said, they are retreating. Their commander has fallen. They are retreating very quickly. Karak asked, what is going on here? Is the battle over? Shutra wondered what the dark elves were doing here. After some time, they contacted Bandal, who said he heard they found a dwarven portal, as expected of Prince Chris. But let him tell me, how did he know it was there? Chris answered, it was not he who found it, but the 9th Prince Shutra. MC replied, he was just lucky. He thought about General Bandal. He was surprisingly pleased to see him again. Bandal asked, yes, he will be properly rewarded at the Demon King's castle. Chris said, there was a fight in front of the Crimson Light tribe's camp today. Does he know anything? Bandal replied, most likely, it was the Dark Elves. Apparently, they decided to intervene themselves. Chris asked, but why are the elves fighting the Crimson Light tribe? Isn't this reinforcements from the Demon King's castle? Bandal replied, it's hard for him to say. Apparently, they were planning to conduct reconnaissance before intervening, but something must have gone wrong. Chris asked, what? Bandal replied, he thinks the Dark Elf leader's independent squad was captured by the Crimson Light tribe. Chris asked, so that's why there was a fight. MC stepped forward and asked them to stop. And who commands the independent squad? Bandal replied, they know her very well. The 6th princess, Felicia Doomblade, their sister. The 6th princess, Felicia Doomblade. She is the daughter of Sylvia Doomblade, the 3rd queen and princess of the Dark Elves, and the twin sister of the 5th prince, Sylvan Doomblade. In the game, Felicia and Sylvan belong to the faction of the 4th princess, Anastasia Necreon. Therefore, he considered them enemies. What is Felicia doing here? Did she intervene to prove her merits? Chris asked, did the idiots from the Crimson Light tribe even realize it was Felicia? Bandal asked, who knows? They haven't been able to confirm it yet. Chris asked, what will they do? Bandal replied, if they can, they will save her. Chris asked, without negotiations? Bandal replied, if they act first, they can try to talk, but he is not going to bow first. Chris answered, understood. Bandal said, he will gather more information from the other side. If anything, he will contact them. Chris answered, okay, they understand. He thought for a moment and said that he thought their unrivaled sister had been taken hostage. Caitlin said that they needed to save her if she was still alive. Chris replied that it would be nice, but it simply wouldn't work. If they tried to save her, they could get hurt themselves. Caitlin screamed, no, they will save her. They have to. She's their sister. Chris frowned and said he knows, but MC looked at him questioningly. After a while, the wolves were standing near the tents in the camp, and the demons were inside the tent. Chris said the plan was simple. When General Bandal attracts the main forces of the Crimson Light tribe, they will strike the camp from the rear. Then he will head straight for the center of the base and cause as much chaos as possible. Caitlin and Shutra, each of them will have their own squad for the task. MC asked, is the task to save their sister? Chris answered, yes. First, they will burn their supplies and weapons, and then they will save Felicia. But if danger arises, they need to retreat immediately. They can't afford to lose more lives for Felicia. Caitlin screamed in displeasure. Brother, he replied, quieter. He is the commander. She screamed. Felicia, she is their family. How can he say that? Chris replied, they can't let Felicia's carelessness interfere with the entire operation. MC thought, what is going on? Chris is in no hurry to save Felicia. Did something happen between them? After a while, a loud order was heard. Forward, warriors. They will destroy the idiots from the Crimson Light tribe. Chris looked out from the mountain and looked at the enemy camp. He frowned, and at that moment a strike was fired at them. Bandel ran forward and ordered to kill them. In the Shutra squad, at that moment Karak said, "The attack has begun." "Why are they standing?" MC replied. "They are waiting for the signal." At that moment, the remaining orcs were fighting, when suddenly a cry was heard. "Now! It's time!" They are all retreating. Chris looked at the wolves and told everyone to get ready. They are moving. They will do everything exactly according to plan. Forward. They quickly rushed to the attack and began to strike. Caitlin told Shutter to be careful, he said, and she should be careful. He opened the map and shouted, "To the left, to the ammunition depot." Karak answered, "Yes." He ordered to kill them. He attacked the orc, but he swung his fist. MC quickly attacked him, and the system window reported, "Level 1 dagger throwing. He can throw daggers at the target." He smirked, and Karak asked, "Prince, has he learned to throw daggers?" Shutra answered, "It's nothing. Let them go quickly." He thought, yesterday he tried throwing daggers and got the skill. Karak said, "It looks like there's a warehouse there. They just need to set it on fire?" MC answered, "Exactly." They continue. He wondered, what about Felicia? If she is there, she can burn. He said, "First they need to find Felicia." Karak asked, "How will he find her?" MC asked to wait. He looked at the system window and thought, Felicia should be a neutral NPC for him, so she will be marked in blue or purple. He shouted, "Here, Karak." The orc answered, "He is coming." A moment later, he burst into the tent and thought, "It must be here. But where is Felicia?" He heard a voice from the side. "Shutra?" Felicia was kneeling and bound with chains. She asked in surprise, "Shutra, what is he doing here?" MC approached her and began to untie the chain. He said, "They will talk later. No need to twitch. It is dangerous here." He needs to untie her and run. He thought it would be useful if Felicia was in his debt. Felicia turned around and looked at him. After a while, they left the tent and Shutra said, "They got out. She needs to run quickly to Chris and Caitlin." Felicia asked, "Chris and Caitlin are here? Have they come to save her?" MC replied, "Of course. Why else? How could they not save her?" Felicia replied, "Simple. Shutra, he was long written off in the power struggle, so she doesn't know." Karak interrupted her and shouted loudly, "Prince, they're coming." MC ran forward and said, "Felicia, come here." She replied, "Okay." She asked to wait. When did he start calling her by name? She looked at him and shouted, "Shutra," from behind. MC turned around and widened his eyes in surprise as mana pierced his body. He screamed, and then a bright flame erupted. Felicia screamed, "Shutra." She spoke, "Shutra." An orc appeared next to her and screamed loudly, and she tried to fight it off. Mana flew into the monster's head, and Felicia turned around and asked, "What is that?" The system window reported that the skill, Mana Control Level 1 was acquired. MC smiled, and another system window reported that the skill Fire Arrow Level 1 was acquired. Shutra attacked a few more orcs and laughed joyfully. He screamed, "Wow, real magic. Only level 1, but already cool." He turned around and saw Ice. He asked, "Ice?" MC looked up and saw an orc archer knocking an arrow. He thought with fear. He was aiming at Felicia. Felicia asked, "Shutra, is he okay?" MC pushed her away and ordered her to stay back. She widened her eyes in surprise and asked, "Shutra?" Ice arrows were aimed at him, and he thought, because they were for him. There was another explosion, and the system window reported that the skill Ice Arrow Level 1 was acquired. MC laughed and said, "I knew it." Suddenly he felt worse, and the system window reported, Health level 13 out of 95. Health has dropped sharply. He is in great danger. Shutra said, "Nightmare health." He thought, one more hit, and Felicia said, "He's an idiot." MC asked Felicia. She frowned and asked, "Who asked him to save her?" MC thought, "What?" Felicia folded her arms across her chest and said, "He is the weakest among the brothers and sisters. Who else needs saving?" Shutra thought, "He thinks Felicia misunderstood something." MC thought, "What?" Felicia looked at the dead orc and asked when he mastered magic. MC thought, she also knocked out the mage. She thought he was saving her. Felicia pulled the ice arrow from his body and began healing. The wound on his body quickly healed, and the system window reported, the skill level 1 healing has been acquired. MC looked at it in surprise and thought, the wound has healed. Here she is, the brilliant magician Felicia Doomblade. She asked, "Is he feeling better? Can he walk?" Shutra answered, "Yes." Thanks to her, the bleeding stopped. Felicia asked, "What? Blood?" MC answered, "No, that is." They turned around and saw a huge orc running towards them and screaming loudly. Felicia asked, "What's going on?" Shutra answered, "It's a blood ogre, one of the mutated species." Felicia asked, "What, does that mean they need to deal with it?" MC answered, "Well, yeah." They started running away from the huge creature, and MC fearfully thought, how should they fight it? The ogre swung his fist and Shutra asked, "What the hell? Why is it so fast?" Felicia asked Shutra to try to buy them time. She will blow it away with magic. MC asked, how should he do that? They jumped from the ogre's blow and Shutra screamed loudly. He said, "Okay. He'll make him angry somehow and she needs to get ready." Felicia asked, "Will he make him angry? How so?" MC replied, "It doesn't matter." He screamed, "Karak, where is he?" Karak replied, "Here." Shutra offered him the same as last time. He needs to get ready. Karak screamed loudly in response. Shutra opened the system window and asked, "Now he can use the dwarven blade, right?" He took it in his hand and stuck it into the ground. He screamed loudly under the royal banner. Mana rushed towards Karak and covered his body. Karak screamed loudly from a surge of strength and rushed to attack. The ogre looked at him in surprise, and Karak swung his axe and struck. Felicia crept up behind the monster, put her hands forward and screamed, "Fat!" A greasy puddle appeared under the monster's feet and it fell to the ground. Karak swung his weapon and screamed, "This is the end." He landed on top of the orc's body and delivered another kick to the stomach. MC laughed and happily said, "They won." He thought there were a couple of opponents left, but they had dealt with the most problematic ones. His body was covered in a bright light, and the system window reported that his level had increased to 10. He thought, finally level 10. The system window reported that the protagonist's customization level had increased. Shoutra said, wonderful. The system window reported that, thanks to the effect of the level 2 protagonist customization, a new passive skill had been added. MC asked, will he open the gift? Battlefield defense is level 1. The accuracy of thrown weapons aimed at the protagonist decreases slightly. Shoutra happily said, that's it. He thought it was the stormtrooper effect. Everyone has seen something like this at least once. Bullets fly like a hail, but somehow, not a single one hits the protagonist. With this skill, he will be able to create the effect of plot armor for the main character. Many orcs came running at the noise, and Felicia screamed, Shoutra, what is he doing? They will be blown away. MC answered, exactly. Felicia waved her hand and screamed, wind, whirlwind and fury. MC looked at it in surprise and thought, it looks like magic, but it's not it. Spirit, it's definitely spirit. Broken or not, dark elf, it's still an elf. Felicia, she's not just a beautiful mage, she was born a spirit summoner. MC asked, but can't he be hit by something like that? Karak asked, Prince, what is this fire? MC answered, yellow means retreat. Karak asked again, retreat. Shoutra wondered, what's going on? Is someone in danger? Karak asked, Prince, what will he order? MC answered, Karak, let him take the troops and leave. He's going to Caitlin. Karak asked, what? Then he's with him. Shoutra adjusted his sleeves and replied, he didn't just order them to leave. Let him do as he said. Karak said, but at that moment, Felicia intervened in the conversation, saying that she would go with Shoutra. Karak said, Princess. Felicia said she didn't want to remain in debt, and she wanted to return the favor. Besides, she wasn't finished with these pigs yet. Karak looked at her carefully and asked them to be careful then. Shoutra said, okay, see you later. Felicia asked, did they really have to go to Caitlin? MC replied, unknown. And also this signal, Felicia asked, he didn't think she could lose like that, did he? Shoutra said, fine, if not, then they would just all go back together. Felicia asked, was he worried about Caitlin? Shoutra answered, of course, she was his sister. He thought, in fact, it was because they were allies. Felicia looked at him thoughtfully and repeated, of course. At that moment, Caitlin was fighting the orcs and quickly moving forward. She blew them up, and the other orcs screamed loudly. The orc swung his weapon, but she jumped back and thrust her hand forward. MC and Felicia stood behind and watched what was happening. Felicia smiled and said she knew it. MC thought, there's no need to worry. Caitlin turned around and asked, Shoutra, why didn't they retreat? MC answered, well, they came to help, but she doesn't need it. Caitlin asked, what do you mean? She happily threw herself on Felicia's neck and screamed, Felicia, how glad she is that she's okay. Felicia answered slightly embarrassedly, of course she's okay, and she is worrying too much. Shoutra looked at them happily and thought, apparently they are close. A map appeared in front of him and he said, the enemies are returning, they need to leave. The girls told him to lead, and they will cover. He replied, okay. After a while they returned to the hall with the portal. Felicia folded her arms and asked, did Shoutra find the portal? Caitlin replied, yes. He made a huge contribution to the conquest. Felicia said, strange. When did he change so much? Chris said, they're back. Caitlin cried out joyfully, brother, she brought Felicia. She turned around and said, Chris, they haven't seen each other for a long time. Chris frowned and replied, yes, Felicia. After a while he said, he heard General Bandal was victorious too. Apparently, that idiot Yakuzan surrendered after seeing the fire. MC asked again, Yakuzan? Caitlin said, it's the commander-in-chief of the Crimson Light tribe. Did he forget? Felicia asked, so Yakudan surrendered? Chris replied, not quite. It looks like he just ran away. He'll be able to fight again if he gathers allies. Tomorrow, they'll strike at Kair, Kaichen's older brother. If he gets involved with the Yakuzans, they'll be in trouble. Okay, enough chatter. How did she end up there? Felicia looked down and said, she was exploring the ruins nearby. She heard about the battle and decided to help. Chris asked again, is it true? Felicia asked, why would she lie? They exchanged glances, and then Chris turned away and said, she's probably tired. It's time for them to finish. Everyone needs to rest. Caitlin replied, okay. He tried hard, bro. Felicia bowed her head silently. After a while the army was eating dinner, and MC sat to the side, observing the skills he had acquired. He said thoughtfully, he enjoyed watching. Apparently in battle, he can only use aura. Felicia called out to Shoutra and asked, can she? MC asked again, Felicia, did she change her clothes? What's wrong? She walked up to him and said, Shoutra. She pulled him close and asked, can he undress? MC asked confusedly, what? Her outfit, but why? Felicia asked, he wants her to heal him, right? Shoutra looked at her puzzled and she said, it was only first aid back then. She started healing and said he might have internal wounds, so now she'll cast a normal spell on him. Shoutra thought he was expecting something a little different. Felicia said, by the way, he was glowing. Something wrong? MC replied, no, that just happens. She asked again, does that happen? Shoutra said he had a favor to ask. Felicia asked, a favor? MC replied, yes, a favor that only she, Felicia, can fulfill. After a while, the system windows reported, first level healing removes the damage status. First level poisoning cure removes the poisoning status. First level disease cure removes the disease status. Shoutra smiled and thought, that's not bad. Felicia agreed to his request and he would receive 3 new healing spells. Some time ago, Felicia was healing MC, and the system windows reported that the skills of healing, curing poisoning, and curing diseases had been acquired. Shutra thought, and today too. Caitlin said, as he knows, there are several schools of hand-to-hand combat. MC thought, finally, he will learn hand-to-hand combat. Caitlin said, today they will learn the beast technique. Beast hand-to-hand combat is a martial art representing lycanthropes. Beast hand-to-hand combat technique is the basis of the beast god's hand-to-hand combat technique. Apparently, that's why Caitlin decided to teach it to him. Caitlin smiled and said, Beast technique uses the internal and external aura. Today, she will teach him the basics of handling the internal aura. Shutra replied, he understood. She told him to close his eyes and focus on the aura. MC closed his eyes and thought, he feels. Aura, the power of life, closest to the power of the soul. When it reaches the limit, it becomes the power of the soul. After a while, Shutra opened his eyes and saw the system window. It reported that he had received a passive skill, the first-level Protagonist's Constitution. This greatly increases the efficiency of learning physical skills. As the skill levels up, the corresponding traits will be unlocked. MC asked, Protagonist's Constitution. He thought, what is this? Is this another bonus? He remembered the skills, Protagonist's Constitution, Archmage's Constitution, and Hero's Blood, and thought, these are the passive abilities of Zephyr and Locke. And the fact that new traits are unlocked at each level means that with new levels, the system adds completely new functions. Shutra smirked and thought, so this is what it's like to be the protagonist. Cool. This is very cool. Caitlin called out to Shutra and asked what he was doing. He needs to focus. He asked her to forgive him. Caitlin said, now they will begin training. MC said, he is ready. He was covered in mana, and the system window reported that he had acquired the skill Beast Melee Level 1. Caitlin said that he had mastered the basics so quickly, it was impressive. Shutra thought it was as if he was holding a deadly weapon, although his hands were empty. Caitlin turned and said, okay, Shutra, they will move on to the next technique. A wolf ran into the cave and shouted, Princess, urgently. Chris frowned and said, Kairam's troops have disappeared. Caitlin asked, what? He replied, it looks like that idiot understood their plan. Caitlin asked, so what should they do now? Chris pointed to a flag on the map and said, according to General Bandal's intelligence, Yakujin and Kairam should meet here. Given the terrain, that's quite likely. Shutra said, then they will launch a decisive attack. Chris smiled and said, they will unite with General Bandal. They will wage an all-out war against the Crimson Light Tribe. The Crimson Light Tribe, the headquarters of the subjugation forces. Bandal said, Prince Chris, he has come a long way. Chris smiled and said, he hasn't changed a bit. They haven't seen each other for a long time, General Bandal. He looked away and said, it's true. He hasn't seen her for a long time either, Princess. How is she doing? Felicia said, stop chatting. How are her subordinates? Bandal replied, no need to worry. They are fine. MC smiled and thought, he used it the most in the game. That's why he is so familiar with it. He approached Bandal and extended his hand and said, nice to meet you, Bandal. He is Shutra. Bandal looked at him incredulously and extended his finger. He said, reciprocally, the 9th Prince Shutra. Suddenly, images of girls appeared in front of MC, one with different eyes and the other with red hair. Conquest. War. Shutra woke up and asked, is this a dream? He thought, he has definitely seen this girl before. But who is that woman in red? Karak looked into the tent and said, Prince, hurry, they are moving. MC replied, okay. They walked outside and MC thought, in this battle, he was assigned to the left flank. Bandal commanded the center and Chris and Caitlin commanded the right flank. The Dark Elves united to protect the rear. The march began, and before he knew it, he found himself in the middle of the battlefield, surrounded by thousands. Bandal frowned and ordered everyone to line up. He offered to show these idiots what pain was. He swung his axe and shouted, forward. The fighters ran forward, and the orc laughed and said, idiots. There was a bright explosion, and Bandal turned around and asked, what? He saw a huge creature and asked, a swamp mammoth? The creature began to quickly attack the fighters, throwing them in different directions. MC said in surprise, so they knew everything from the start? A swamp mammoth. From its name, it's clear that it resembles a mammoth, but it can't compare to a regular mammoth. It's the embodiment of ugliness. The lizardmen stepped forward, clutching swords in their paws. Shutra turned and thought, and the lizardmen too. Chris frowned and said, oh my god, so they knew everything and were just playing with them. Caitlin screamed, brother, she thinks they should retreat and look for other options. Chris asked, what? But if they can't retreat, they'll suffer even more. They might all be killed. Caitlin said that if this continues, there will only be more losses. We need to decide. It's time to retreat. Chris ordered everyone to listen to him. Mages, they must create a defense in the rear and hold out as long as they can. The rest, let them prepare to retreat. The lizardmen began to fight the orcs, and one of them rushed towards Shutra. He got scared and Karak quickly attacked the monster from behind. He ordered MC to come to his senses. One wrong move, and they will all be finished. MC answered, exactly. He thought Karak was right. This is not a game. Chris hit the orc with his elbow and ordered everyone to return alive, no matter what. Don't dare die. After some time, the elves in the camp were healing the warriors, and Chris stood over the map and said, it was he who overlooked it. He should have suspected. Bandal folded his arms across his chest and replied that what's done is done. Now they can either retreat or ask for reinforcements from the Demon King's castle. Chris frowned and said, apparently, yes. He can't allow his subjects to die because of his pride. That. Felicia raised her hand and asked him to wait, thinking for a moment. She had come to this area primarily to inspect the ruins, and the final destination was the peak of the Gishkov Mountains. MC thought Felicia might be an outstanding mage, but even in the game, she wasn't a fighter. Her skills were focused on exploration. Felicia said she'd been studying the ruins for a long time. The lair of the stone dragon Enkidu had been in these mountains for 1500 years. Enkidu, a dragon born from magma, had attracted various guardians to protect his lair and treasures. Among the guardians were also dwarves, who had once lived in the Gishkov Mountains. Enkidu had given them weapons to protect the lair. Chris asked again, "Weapons?" Felicia replied, "An anvil that generates thunder. A relic that allows not only control over the chimeras created to serve the guardians, but also cast spells on an entire army. If they want to win, this is their only option. That's what she came here to look for." Vandal said then, "Does she know the exact location of this anvil?" Felicia replied, "No. That's all she knows." Chris frowned and said, "Well, that's not very useful information. They don't know when the enemy will strike again. At a time like this, they can't risk everyone's lives on a foolish treasure hunt." Felicia screamed. "What?" Chris, MC said. "The anvil that generates thunder is definitely here." Everyone asked in surprise. Shutra? He thought, that's right. When he played as the hero Locke, he encountered this. He said he also discovered a related story when he was studying dwarven runes. And besides, he trusted Felicia. She said, "Shutra." He thought, it's time for him to earn points. Chris frowned and said, "Shutra, it's not about trust. If they waste their time." MC thought, terrible. Well, Chris is so stubborn. He pointed his finger at the mountains and said, "There is a similar legend in the Gandharva tribe." He thought, if that's the case. He said, "The chances that the entrance to the ruins is somewhere nearby are high. If he goes to reconnoiter the territory, he will definitely find it. He takes responsibility for everything that can happen if he fails." "Just this once?" he asks. Believe him. He thought, it's time to go for broke. After a while, they were all racing through the sky on phantom steeds, flying horses summoned by Felicia. Shutra thought, well, at least they were able to knock out the right to search for the anvil. All that remains now. Karak turned around and screamed, "This is madness. Prince, let him hold on tight. He might fall." MC told him not to worry. He thought, he won't fall. When he played Zephyr, he drove like this all the time. He opened the map and thought, at this speed, they should be at the entrance in about an hour. And with his minimap, it wouldn't be hard to find the ruins themselves. The problem was, how should he direct them so it looked natural? He frowned thoughtfully and thought, okay, he still had a whole hour. He'd think of something. After a while, Shitra said, when he activated the portal, he carefully studied the tunnel maps. They had a certain pattern. If he combined this terrain with the position of the tunnels, he thought he could roughly determine where the anvil was. He thought, did it work? Karak and Caitlin looked at him in surprise, and then everyone asked, what did he just say? What did that mean? Shitra laughed fearfully and thought, nightmare. Let them just ignore and not pay attention. Felicia said, let him lead, Shitra. He turned around and asked, Felicia? She said, she understood everything, so let him lead. He smiled and thought he was just bluffing, but did that explanation really work? He said, okay, everyone follow him. Felicia frowned. And after a while, Karak said, they followed the prince, but there's a dead end here. Are you sure they're going the right way? This doesn't look like an entrance at all. Shitra laughed and asked, who said they were heading for the entrance? Karak looked at him questioningly, and MC asked, Caitlin, will she be able to break through this rubble? She looked at it and asked, will she? MC said, yes, let her hit it hard. Caitlin smiled and said, okay, she'll try. Felicia asked, only not to tell that the anvil that gives birth to thunder is inside the rock. Shitra smiled and said, well, according to his calculations, if they break through this ruin, they won't have to deal with the dungeon's guards. So what if she, Caitlin, breaks down this wall? Felicia cried out in displeasure. Idiot. How does he think she'll smash it with her bare hands? He thinks Caitlin is some kind of battering ram? MC asked thoughtfully, how then? Felicia created a stream of mana and said, ruin explorers always have an additional specialty in destruction and explosives. Does he know? She directed mana forward, after which there was an explosion. Rocks flew in all directions and Felicia said, it can't be. Did they really find it that quickly? What is this dome? Is that thunder thing inside? Shatra answered, yes. It looks like this is the last defense. There is an anvil inside. Karak asked, so what? They'll just break it. MC answered, no, that's not possible. So they can damage the anvil. There must be a mechanism that will open it. Felicia looked to the side and asked, don't they think these statues look strange? Out of the 9, only 3 hold weapons, and the other 6 don't. Caitlin said, she's right. Then maybe they should give weapons to the remaining statues? Felicia replied, she doesn't think it's that simple. The weapons of these statues are made by dwarves. This means that the other statues need the same weapons. Caitlin asked, dwarven swords? Where would they get those? Are there more? Shatra said about that. It turns out that he just happens to have 6 of those. Felicia turned around and screamed, what? MC thought he couldn't use it since his level wasn't high enough, so he kept it in his inventory. He never would have thought that they would come in handy in a situation like this. What luck for him. He said he picked it up just in case when they were exploring those tunnels. Karak asked, when did he even, and how did he manage to fit 6 of them in his bag? Shatra thought he didn't like smart orcs like him. He laughed and asked, what difference did it make? Anyway, Karak, they're heavy. Let him hurry and take it. Karak said, well, he's so fragile. Let him give it here. They placed the swords in the golem's hands, after which a bright glow illuminated the hall. Someone said to look. The dome is opening. MC asked, is that the anvil that generates thunder? Felicia asked to wait. Judging by the records, there's one more thing that needs to be done to activate the anvil. MC asked, one more thing? Felicia ordered Shutra and Karak to remain in place. The rest need to take positions at 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock around the disc. Then they will pour mana into the disc. They will start with it and go clockwise. Gradually, the amount of poured mana should increase. She released mana and told them to focus. They were starting. Everyone was releasing mana towards the anvil and Felicia ordered Shutra to increase the mana flow. He replied, he understood. She said, okay, keep it up. You can't lose concentration. Mana covered the anvil. When suddenly there was a bright explosion, a stream of mana burst out of the cave. MC looked around and saw many dwarves around and a dragon. He asked, what is it? A voice rang out. His vassals, let them heed his words. MC thought, the voice from somewhere above? He saw a dragon. He must protect the nest of the great Enkidu. Become a guard who will stand between the kingdom of demons and the kingdom of people. MC woke up in fear and widened his eyes. Shutra thought it was definitely a black dragon. A black dragon, the stone dragon of Enkidu? Felicia asked, did he see it too, Shutra? A huge black dragon, and lava flowed through its veins. Karak grabbed his head and said, he saw it too. This dragon. So they all had the same vision? Felicia answered, it seemed so. She is not sure what it means yet. She turned around and looked at the anvil and said, but one thing is certain. Using the anvil, they will find out the truth. She touched it with her hand, and suddenly dark mana appeared. It headed towards her, and she screamed. MC screamed, Felicia, make her stop. He extended his hand and screamed loudly. Caitlin screamed in fear, Shutra, Felicia. Karak screamed, Prince. MC screamed loudly as mana rushed into his body. Subjugation. The mana of the stone dragon Enkidu. His trial befalls those who have not been granted permission. Subjugation is the manifestation of power. After a while, Shutra was kneeling on the floor, holding a black energy hammer. Someone asked, Shutra? At that moment, an orc was watching the camp through a monocular and laughing. He asked, are they idiots? Did they think that if they hid here, they wouldn't be found? What will they do? Will they attack immediately? Let him just give the order, Lord Yakuzan. The commander-in-chief of the Crimson Light tribe, Yakuzan, turned around and ordered everyone to get ready. They will destroy those who are still left. The orcs raised their heads and saw fiery projectiles flying towards them. Explosions occurred and the enemy, along with the mammoths, headed towards the orcs. Chris frowned and said, nightmare. Neither Caitlin nor Felicia are here now. They will all be destroyed at this rate. Yakujen watched the battle and laughed. He said, stupid demons. They went where they shouldn't, and this is the result. Serves them right. Now they will finish off the rest. Kill them all. The mage extended his hand forward and asked, puzzled, why his hand wasn't moving. The mammoth's eyes changed and the creatures went into battle with their own kind. Yakujin cried out in confusion. What? What's going on? Why are they attacking them? Chris looked at it and said, it can't be. Did they find an anvil? At that moment, Shutra was kneeling and holding a hammer in his hands. He asked, what is it? Felicia said, it's a thunder hammer, in addition to the anvil. It looks like Enkidu has chosen him. MC asked again, him? Felicia shouted, what? He's standing up. Let him use it. Shutra looked at the hammer thoughtfully and thought, Enkidu's mana showed him how to wield it, to conquer, to subjugate, and to force obedience. Subjugation is a manifestation of power, the method of using the anvil that gives birth to thunder. Shutra swung it and said, he'll start with the swamp mammoths. The mana shot into the air and infused itself into the mammoth's body. Blows began to fall everywhere and the monsters screamed. What's going on? Why did they suddenly start attacking them? The orc turned around when suddenly Bandel attacked him and said, judging by the way the swamp mammoths are attacking the Crimson Light tribe, it seems to him that the prince and princess have succeeded after all. It's time to kill them all. He ordered that no one be allowed to escape. The monsters were fighting, and Yakujan stood on the cliff and asked, what the hell? Why were the swamp mammoths acting like this? The orc replied, he doesn't know. Who could possess so much mana? They should retreat now and wait for another chance. Yakujan cried out, what? At that moment, Chris landed next to them and said, it looks like they're finished. If they surrender, he promises them a quick death. Yakujan cried out, idiot. He swung his weapon and shouted, he'll tear him to pieces. Chris used the beast god's hand-to-hand combat art and charged. The orcs began to scatter and shout, the chieftain is dead. Lord Yakujan has been killed. We have to run. Chris wiped the blood from his hand and said, now he just needs to deal with the rest. He imagined Shutra and Felicia and thought, if it weren't for those two, they would be in serious trouble. He hoped nothing had happened to them. At that moment, Karak was looking at what was happening through the screen and saying, come on, is this really what the swamp mammoths are seeing right now? Felicia said, yeah. With the anvil, it's possible to control all the treasure guardians. In any case, with the anvil, the Crimson Light tribe, she whispered, it will. She was pulled to the side and Caitlin barely managed to catch her. She screamed in fear. Felicia, how is she? Karak screamed. Princess Felicia, is she okay? She asked not to worry. She just needs to rest a little and she'll be fine. Sarah said, okay. She suggested quickly finding a place for. Felicia looked around and asked, Shutra? After a while, MC said, he can finally rest. The system window reported several times, his level has increased. He looked at it and asked, his level has increased very much, right? Is it because he controlled Enkidu's relic? The system window reported that the conquest level had increased. MC asked, what is this? He looked at the skills and said in surprise, even under the royal banner had improved? He thought, So both this level and the conquest level, he didn't fully understand it, but if his main skill was getting stronger, that was only a plus for him. Shutra asked, and what kind of skill is that? King's Knights. Judging by the name, it seemed to be a summoning type. A shout was heard behind him. Shutra? He turned around and asked, Caitlin? MC ruffled his hair and said exactly. He left without saying a word, right? Caitlin punched him in the head and screamed, seriously, what was he thinking? Disappearing so suddenly, Shutra. He asked for forgiveness. Caitlin said, okay, enough about him being fine. But it's time to go back. It looks like they'll have to camp here for the night. Shutra asked, aren't they going straight back? Caitlin replied, that was the original plan, but a problem arose. MC asked, what problem? Caitlin replied, Felicia had lost consciousness. They returned to the cave and she said she had just escaped the captivity of the Crimson Light tribe. But apparently she had overexerted herself too much. Before passing out, she said she just needed to rest, but she didn't know when she would wake up. And without her, they couldn't even summon a phantom mount. So for now, they need to monitor her condition here. Shutra replied, okay. He thought, Felicia, will she be okay? After a while, everyone was asleep. And MC was sitting by the column, wondering if his stamina had really fully recovered just because he had leveled up. Strange, he didn't feel tired at all. He just needed to wait until morning. He looked at the door in surprise and thought, it only just now dawned on him. These are ruins, right? So there must be hidden weapons and treasures in the dungeon. Of course, there will be traps and guards. Shutra looked at the hammer and thought, but what if he is the lord of these ruins? The power of the anvil only works here. But it is in these ruins that it becomes absolute power. It turns out that he now has complete carte blanche over this entire place. He woke up Karak and told him to go with him somewhere. After a while they were walking through the dungeon, and Karak asked if it was okay to just break in like that. What if something goes wrong? MC replied, he is the lord of this place, why should he worry? Let him think carefully. These are ruins. There must be good weapons here. Karak said, and indeed. He widened his eyes in surprise and said, Prince, there is a huge monster there. Shutra said, it is a guardian golem, and it is in the form of a griffin. Karak asked again, is it a guardian golem? MC answered, yes, but he might think it was just an incredibly powerful monster. If they had just rushed in here thoughtlessly, they could have died right away. Karak said not to jinx it. He suggested they go already. Well, what a size, he would prefer not to fight such a monster. MC laughed and asked, Karak, is he a coward, right? Karak replied, he's just cautious. They went further and Karak shouted, Prince, they found treasure. He grabbed the armor and said to look, it's simply amazing armor. Shutra said, he's right, it looks very good. He looked around and thought he could feel a subtle mana. It's magic armor. He asked, Karak, does he want to take it? Karak happily asked, what? Is it really possible? MC replied, yes, it's still too big for him. Karak said, thank you. Thank him so much, Prince. Shutra picked up a coin and asked, what is it? Ancient gold coins? First, it's better to put everything useful in your inventory. He turned around and told Karak to grab anything worthwhile he could. He saw a chest and asked, what is it? MC walked up to it when he suddenly saw a door open to the side and asked, what's going on? A secret place? He happily said, it looks like there's definitely something there. Shutra entered the room and said, after passing through the corridor, they suddenly found themselves in a huge room. He heard a voice and said, it is. He thought, he knows this mana. Even though it was the first time he saw it, the name just popped into his head. He said, Enkidu, this is Enkidu's gauntlet, the Shaker. The voice said, brave conquering knight. MC thought, Enkidu's gauntlet, the Shaker. The Shaker is calling him. He walked up to the gauntlet and tried to take it. The system window reported, insufficient level, not enough mana. Not enough psychic power, not enough strength. Shutra asked, what? You can't wear it yet? Suddenly the gauntlet got rid of dark mana and the voice reported, aloud. The system window reported, the Shaker recognizes him as its master. The user of the Shaker has been changed to Shutra. The gauntlet was put on MC's hand, and he cried out in surprise and frowned. He opened his eyes and asked, did it recognize him as its master? The system window reported, strength, mana, and endurance increased by 10 points. Shutra said, amazing, he thought. He put it on and the stats went up so much. Then once he gains a level, this is incredible. This is even better than he expected. The system window reported, this is Enkidu's glove. Karak asked, Prince, what was that? MC turned around in fear and asked, Karak, has he been here long? Karak answered, he saw everything. The glove appeared out of nowhere. MC said, so he saw everything. He thought, a nightmare. If they find out about the inventory, there will be problems. Karak asked, whatever it is, if people find out, there will be problems? Shutra looked at him questioningly, and he said not to worry. This will stay between them. He will take this secret with him to the grave. MC turned to Karak, and he said, they collected everything they need. Are they going back? It's kind of creepy in here. He has a bad feeling. Shutra said, yes, it's time to go back. They walked through the storage room when suddenly he screamed. Just a minute, Karak. He asked, what this time? MC asked, can't he see? Karak asked, what is he talking about? MC said, there's exactly what they need. After a while, he gave Felicia a potion and she regained consciousness. He smiled and asked, Felicia, is she awake? She asked, Shutra. Caitlin screamed, thank God. Felicia asked, Caitlin, what happened? Caitlin wiped a tear from her eye and answered, Shutra returned the mana restoration potion. Felicia asked, where did it come from? Shutra asked, did she forget where they were? Felicia said. The ruins. MC answered. Exactly. Don't forget that he is the ruler of the ruins. No need to worry. Let her rest. When she wakes up, her mana will be fully restored. Felicia thanked him, and MC looked at her questioningly. She spoke shyly. She said thank you. After a while, Vandal shouted, they are finally back. He knew the prince and princess would succeed. He laughed and said, they are great. Chris cleared his throat, and MC asked, Chris? He cleared his throat again and said, that was impressive, Felicia. She shook her head and said, it's nothing. Shutra smiled and thought, how heartwarming. Chris said to rest. They'll clean up. MC asked, what? Not over yet? Chris said the Crimson Light tribe still remains. It will return in half a month at most. Shutra answered, I see. So they can rest for half a month? Caitlin said, no rest. MC asked, confused. What? Caitlin replied, they still have things to do. After a while she punched him and screamed, Shutra, he needs to pull himself together or he'll get hurt. Come on, let him get up. MC lay on the ground and breathed. He thought he was ready, but this was too tough. Beast hand-to-hand combat training. Caitlin meant exactly training. For the first 5 days, it felt like he was being beaten. Only after a week did he begin to see Caitlin's blows. And the 11th day of training came. MC got close to Caitlin. She said, and he's starting to get the hang of it. Shutra smiled and said, it's about time. After so many beatings, perhaps it's all thanks to special training? But the beast's aura and hand-to-hand combat levels have increased to level 5. Caitlin said, good. Soon, he will be ready for the beast god's hand-to-hand combat art. MC asked again, really? Caitlin answered. To be honest, she was impressed. She had never seen anyone learn so quickly. He smiled and thought, he will finally learn the secret technique of the lycanthropes, the hand-to-hand combat art of the beast god. Caitlin took his hands and said, now she will teach him a new way to use aura. She ordered him not to miss anything and to listen carefully. Does he understand, Shutra? He smiled and answered, yes. They joined hands and released mana. Shutra thought, he can feel Caitlin's aura. She is guiding him. It's like beast melee combat, but a little different. He feels the depth of the aura more and more. Aura is life force. When it reaches its peak, it becomes like the power of the soul and conquest. To conquer and force submission, a ferocious, overwhelming force is needed. Is this aura? After some time, the system windows reported that the beast melee level had increased. The aura level had increased. Caitlin said, it's incredible. He did it. The system window reported that he had acquired the skill Beast God Melee Art, level 1. Shutra looked at his hand and thought, Shaker and Beast God Melee Art. He clenched his fist and released mana. The system window reported that his level had increased. Level 14. He said, yes. Now it has definitely begun. At that moment, Vandal was watching them from behind the tree. The next morning, MC said, yes. Can he ask about Felicia? Caitlin asked, what exactly? He asked, what's going on between her and Chris? He thought Felicia was supposed to be his key ally, just like Chris. But if their relationship is so strained, there could be problems. He said it wasn't that things were bad, but they were distant. Caitlin answered thoughtfully, well, it wasn't that anything had happened between them. MC asked, what then? She didn't know, but she thought it had something to do with Chris and Sylvan. MC asked again. Sylvan? Caitlin replied. He wasn't here, but there was no need to say his name so loudly. MC apologized. He was just surprised. He thought it was Felicia's twin, Sylvan Doomblade. When he played for Zephyr, he was quite a problem. Shutra said that meant there was a conflict between Chris and Sylvan. At that moment, Chris entered the tent and said they were here. They looked at him in fear, and Shutra said, Chris? Caitlin asked, what happened? He's early. Chris told them to get ready. Everything went faster than they thought, so they're heading out today. Shutra asked, where? Chris asked. Was he seriously asking? Of course, to report that everything is ready. After a while, Bandal shook MC's hand and said, they've done a great job this time, princes and princesses. He looks forward to the day when they meet again, the 9th prince. Shutra said, he does too, Bandal. Chris asked, are they coming? MC turned around and said, yes. Chris said, they're coming to the Demon King's castle. The Demon King was sitting in the hall at that time. The way back to the Demon King's castle is quite simple. First, you need to get to a teleportation circle capable of ultra-long-range spatial jumps, and then use transfer magic to get straight to the Demon King's castle. The estimated time to the nearest teleportation circle is 3 days. This journey didn't involve any stops in taverns at all. In other words, another night under the open sky lay ahead. MC said, the Demon King's castle. To think they were arriving tomorrow made him a little nervous. Currently, the Demon King's castle was divided into 3 main factions. The second prince, Zephyr Ragnaros, the Demon King's second son and archenemy, the first prince, Baikal Ragnaros, and the fourth princess, Anastasia Nekrion. In the struggle for the throne, birth order didn't matter. The one who accumulated more achievements and was more capable would always occupy the highest position. That was their structure. Baikal and Zephyr were half-brothers, and their abilities were almost equal. They inherited the blood of their mother's lineage, the Dragon Clan, and as a result, both possessed immense power. Still, if they had to choose a successor, the calmer-tempered eldest son, Baikal, would probably be the better choice. Shutra said, not that the choice mattered at all, because after that day, everything would change, so he had to be prepared for anything. First, he will level up until he can fully master the Overseer and make the most of his newfound power. He said, King's Knights. The system window reported, the skill, King's Knights, has been activated. The knightly order has been created. Shutra looked at the system window with the skill description and said, he thought it was just another summoning type skill. Maybe this is some kind of guild system? There are buffs, knight training, even summoning. This is a broken skill. If it's so good at level 1, How strong will it become later? Karak approached him and said, so that's where he is. He shouted in displeasure. Why isn't he sleeping again, Prince? You need to sleep so you can leave early in the morning. He ordered him to go to bed quickly. Shitra laughed and said, Karak, you're just in time. Does he want to conduct an experiment on him? Karak looked at him puzzled and asked, what kind? MC said, the mighty orc warrior, Karak. He placed his sword on his shoulder and said, he hereby appoints him as his knight. Karak was covered in mana and said in surprise, Prince, such a strange feeling. He feels like his devotion has grown. The system window reported, Karak is a level 24 knight commander, a first-rank private. MC smiled and replied, yes, that's exactly what he was talking about. Karak said, it's good that he's gotten stronger. But what's that even about? Shatra put his hand on his shoulder and asked, Karak, doesn't he want to become the strongest orc in this world? Well, let him wait. He will raise him into the mightiest orc emperor in the Night Saga, someone who can fight on equal terms even with the dragon races. If his growth rate continues, then from now on, Karak looked at him, puzzled, and asked, Prince, is he feeling unwell? After a while, they came to the teleporter, and Chris asked, well, are they coming? Shitra said, yes. They stepped on the teleportation field and began to move. MC's eyes widened in fear and asked to stop. He was flying through space when he suddenly landed. Caitlin asked, is he okay, Shatra? He replied, yes, I'm fine. At that moment, a loud scream was heard. Felicia! The elves rushed towards her and shouted, Felicia! They were waiting for her. She is beautiful as always, Lady Felicia. She smiled happily back at them, and MC said, it feels like this is some kind of idol fan club. Are these her servants and subordinates? The other characters said, they were waiting for him. Prince Chris. Lady Caitlin, she has become even more beautiful. Chris smiled and said, they haven't seen each other for a long time. How are they doing? Shatra laughed and asked, so there is no one for him. The elves looked at him and asked, what? Seriously? MC looked around and thought, now it's clear. This is roughly his position in the Demon King's castle. He exhaled and said, well, nothing. He expected this. Is he ready, Karak? They are gradually starting to change everything. After a while, MC entered a room where everything was covered in trash and cobwebs. Karak said, he thinks they can settle here. Shatra said, well, at least they found a room. Thank goodness. Karak said, by the way, the official events start tomorrow. Until then, they can do whatever they want. MC said whatever they want, he says. It feels like they've been left to rot. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door and a girl walked in. She said, it's an honor to meet him, sir. She's Flora Sevenswords from the Demon King's Castle Property Management Bureau. Shatra asked, the Property Management Bureau? What brought an employee from such an institution to this hole? Flora said, his public service level has risen, His Highness. He now has the right to choose a new residence. After a while, the girl said, she's Isabella from the Public Service Department. She's come to meet His Highness. Shatra asked, can he really get a new residence? Isabella said yes. He's come to the right place. Thanks to his latest victory, His Highness's merit level has risen to level 5. System windows appeared in front of Shatra, the 9th Prince of Shatra Ignis. His total accumulated merits amounted to 15,000. Details of his participation in the extermination of the Crimson Light Tribe were also presented. Isabella said that thanks to this, His Highness now has access to more facilities in the Demon King's castle, and his monthly allowance has been increased from 5 gold coins to 500. He is the first prince to achieve such a result in his very first mission. MC laughed and asked, really? Then couldn't she show him the available residences right away? Isabella replied, of course. After a while, Karak's eyes widened in surprise, and he said, Prince, and this is his new residence? They stood in front of the enormous castle, looking at it. Flora approached them and said, they arrived earlier than expected. Karak looked at her questioningly and she replied, from this day on, she will serve him with honor. The system window reported, Maid Flora Sevensword. She could be a butler or a headmaid. She is a follower of Camille, the goddess of dreams and shadows. Karak asked, what's going on? Didn't she say she was from a real estate agency? MC replied, he hired her using his merit points. It's some kind of currency you earn for accumulating achievements. Well, that's how it works. No need to go into details. Karak said, Prince, he's been talking nonsense lately. The next day, Karak was standing in a suit and saying, Prince, he keeps feeling like he needs to go to the bathroom. Do you think it's just nerves? MC replied, disgusting. Let him go already. He's making him nervous with just this conversation. Caitlin walked into the room and said, they look amazing. Felicia smiled and asked who she thought chose the outfits. Caitlin screamed, Felicia, she's the best. She put her hand to her face and said, well, she guesses all her hard work paid off. Caitlin winked and said, he looks great, Shatra. It suits him very well. MC thanked her and said, they look great too. Caitlin fixed her hair and asked, is it really so? Thank you. Felicia said, of course. Chris asked, by the way, is this his first audience? Shatra said, Chris. He extended his fist to him and said, today he is a star. Let him show himself to everyone in the Demon King's castle. MC replied, yes, perhaps there are those who think he was just lucky, but soon everyone will turn their eyes on him. The demons gathered in the hall, and MC and his siblings entered the hall. MC thought they would take a new look at the worthless prince they once rejected. Chris knelt and said, he, the 7th prince, Chris Moonlight. He appears before the great ruler of the demon realm. Mithra, the demon king, sat in a chair and looked at them intently. The butler said, now they will report on the achievements of their princes and princesses. MC thought, Demon King Mithra, the father of all the children of demon kings. He almost forgot. He is someone who should never be underestimated in the Demon King's castle. He tried to raise his head and thought, what is this pressure? He is just standing in front of him, and it feels like he is about to crumble. He felt the presence of the girl who said, conquest, for he is also a king. He needs to cope with the gaze, the suffocating pressure, and he needs to bend them to his will, for such is the power of conquest. Shutra was able to raise his head and look into Mithra's eyes. He addressed Shutra, which caused everyone to be very surprised. Mithra said, he looks forward to his future achievements. The demons began to talk among themselves. What is even going on? His Majesty has never called any prince or princess by name during an audience before. Why would he mention the ninth prince, who was hardly noticed? MC thought he said it completely casually, but this was a statement no one had ever heard from the Demon King before, and that made it priceless. Shutra said he would do his utmost to live up to his Majesty's expectations. And so, he, Shutra Ignis, concluded his first audience, leaving a strong impression on everyone present. After a while, a cry rang out in the mansion. Prince, what does he wish for? Let him get up quickly. Shutra asked. What happened? It's still so early. Karak shouted. A letter from the Public Service Department just arrived. MC picked up the letter and asked, Public Service Department? Why? He widened his eyes in surprise, and Karak asked, what was it? Let him read it out loud. Shutra asked, how should he feel about this? It seemed the Demon King himself, that is, his father, had given him a personal mission. After a while, Chris looked at the letter and said, a mission to pacify the Cassius herd. Monster extermination then. Caitlin asked, is he going to the Anger Plains? Shutra asked again, the Anger Plains? Isn't that where the centaurs live? Caitlin answered, yes, she and Chris went there once to train. Chris said that pacifying the Cassius herd has practically become an annual event. He would go with him, but they have their own schedule. Caitlin said, no matter. Shutra can handle it himself. Chris said, but Shutra, people will start paying attention to him now. Some will try to get close to him. Others will be wary of him. He will have to pay attention to a lot. MC thought, he knows. Even Zephyr said that he was never called by name during the audience. Chris said that if he needed help, he should not hesitate to ask him. Shitra smiled and said, thank you, Chris. He said that before he left, he needed to treat Felicia. She said that she had prepared something for him. MC asked in surprise, for him? After some time, he came to Felicia, and she said that to travel through the territory of the centaurs, he needed good legs. She put her hand on the lizard's body and said to take it. Shutra thanked Felicia, she said, and more. MC said, this. Felicia handed him a pendant, and he thought, a dark elf tear? She was giving him one of the sacred relics of the dark elves? Usually, you can only get it by killing Felicia herself. She said, dark elves are a proud people. They do not forget either good or revenge. She hugged him and told him to take care of himself and return safe and sound, Shutra. He looked at her slightly embarrassed and thought, she scared him. He never thought that Felicia could be like this. He said, okay, Felicia. Before he could finish speaking, she suddenly pushed him away and screamed, nothing. Shutra thought, well, she must have just realized how awkward it was. He waved and said, okay, he's off. Good luck and see you next time. They teleported, and Felicia said, okay. After a while, they moved to the Anger Plains. Karak asked, are they there yet? Shutra answered, it seems so. A girl approached them and said she greets him, the ninth prince. She is Karma, the ranger assigned to be his guide. MC said, I see. It's a pleasure to meet her. He is Shutra. He thought for a moment the upper body of a man and the lower body of a beast. Karma said, in return, Lord Shutra, it is a great honor for her. MC thought, a satyr then. He then suggested that they move on immediately. They quickly headed forward and Karma said, it was at least 2 days. Journey from here to the centaur settlement. She plans to go with minimal stops. Is that okay with him? MC answered, no problem. Karma asked, by the way, are there any other soldiers? Shutra replied that the mission had come suddenly, so for now it was just the 2 of them. Karma said that, however, they would have centaurs on their side, so there would be no numerical advantage. MC said that meant it would be a massive battle. Shutra thought that in that case, the real problem would be weapons. Since it could turn into something like a mounted battle, perhaps a spear would be best. Suddenly, he turned around and asked what that sound was. Karma said to wait, she would check. She quickly ran forward and looked around. She said, it can't be. A herd of Cassias. How did they find them? The monsters ran after the guy, who turned around in fear and screamed. Suddenly, MC appeared in front of him and attacked the Cassia. The centaur looked at him in surprise, and Shutra said, it looks like they decided to greet them early, but no matter. After all, he himself was eager to fight. He activated the gauntlet and ordered the creatures to attack. The guy asked, who is he? Is he a prince? The Cassius screamed loudly and rushed into battle. MC said, right, so it's the main one here? Karma rushed towards him and shouted, is he okay, your highness? Karak screamed, you can't rush forward like that. It's dangerous. Shutra screamed, it's okay, just let them watch. He pushed off the lizard's back and rushed into battle with Cassia. Shutra decided to try out his martial art, which he had been practicing all this time. Cassia screamed loudly and MC activated the explosive fist. Everyone's eyes widened in surprise, and Cassia died from one blow. The other Cassias saw this and ran away, barking loudly. Shutra asked, what is it? He wondered. Did the concussion boost his aura? It was much more destructive than he expected. He smiled and said, almost at Caitlin's level of power. Karma screamed joyfully, amazing, your highness. Take off Cassia's head with one blow. The centaur said in surprise, thank you so much for saving them, his highness. His name is Swiftwind, a scout sent to be his guide. From here, he will lead them to the centaur settlement on the Anger Plains. At that moment, Cassia's body was covered in mana as they were already leaving. After some time they arrived at the Anger Plains, the Centaur settlement. MC said, they have finally arrived. 4 Centaur tribes live on these plains: Furious Wind, Rainstorm, Heavy Night, and Raging Flame. Among them, the Raging Flame tribe is the most powerful. Its leader is also the supreme leader, uniting the other tribes. The centaur said, the journey here must have been difficult. Welcome. He is Killing Gaze, the supreme leader of the centaurs. Killing Gaze, anyone who played the Night Saga chapter, Demon Land, would recognize this name, as meeting him is inevitable, but not as an ally, but as an enemy. Karak leaned toward MC and said, he really does have a murderous gaze. MC said, he is Shutra, the 9th prince. He would like to hear his assessment of the current situation. After some time inside the tent, Murderous Glare said, to be honest, the situation is not the best. The Cassia, which by now should have been far north, descended south much earlier than usual this year. Therefore, right now, scouts are observing the territory, although some speculate that part of the Cassia herd may have simply lost its way. Shutra thought, in the game, Murderous Glare was an unrecruitable NPC. It was impossible to form an alliance with him. Murderous Glare said, in 3 days, warriors from all 4 tribes will gather here. By uniting, they will be able to destroy the beasts wherever they are. MC thought, but perhaps this time everything will be different. He said, I understand, then he will wait. Something else? Murderous Glare said, the 9th prince. Is it true that he crushed Cassia's skull with 1 blow? MC smirked and said it's true. He thought, perhaps, Killing Glare could become an ally this time too. Shutra extended his fist forward and said, he can demonstrate later if he wants. He thought, just like Caitlin and Chris. Killing Glare nodded his head and said, he will wait with impatience. They went outside and walked through the centaur camp, who were watching him closely. They said, the 9th prince, is that the one who crushed Cassia's skull with 1 blow? Karak turned around and asked, has he gained popularity here too? MC laughed and said, of course, all thanks to his innate charm and virtue. Karak said, probably no need to say that. Let him go and rest, his highness. After a while, he was lying on the bed and snoring, when suddenly he saw a glow. He woke up and saw that the glove on his hand was glowing. He thought, concussion? He asked in surprise, how did this end up in his hand? A girl appeared before him and said, the 9th prince, Shutra Ignis. She needed his help. He asked in surprise, who is she? The girl replied, she is a fragment of the observer, Ankle, the Green Wind. He said in surprise, Green Wind. He thought Green Wind is one of the nature spirits worshipped by centaurs and satyrs. According to the lore of the Night Saga, thanks to the power of Green Wind, the plains of Anger bloomed. The next second, they found themselves on a vast plain, and Green Wind said that this place is her home. A fragment of her creator, the observer Ankle, is here. The protagonist said, a fragment of Ankle, she must wait. He thought, observer Ankle, one of the 6 ancient dragons? Ancient dragons are divine beings that players could never encounter in the Night Saga. He only recently obtained the Shaker Enkidu. Now he will meet the observer Ankle? He looked at the glove on his hand and said, too many coincidences. Then Green Wind said, Prince, they don't have time. The monster of the north is approaching her home. He looked at her in surprise, and she added, they want to steal the greenery of the Anger Plains. They will destroy her home and absorb her spirit, but only he can protect this place. He was surprised. He? But he isn't at a high enough level. She said, after all, he already has the power of Enkidu. He shouldn't worry. She pointed her hand at him and, releasing energy, added, the fragment of Ankle will grant him great power. First, he must show this sign to her children. The next second, he returned to the room, and the green energy began to dissipate. After that, he turned his attention to the object in his hand, and Green Wind said that they would certainly help him. After a while, Murderous Glare shouted, what is he saying all of a sudden? Green Wind is in danger? The protagonist stood in front of him. He folded his arms across his chest and said that there was a small temple to the northeast. If Green Wind was telling the truth, the Cassi would soon attack him. There's no time. He needs to gather his troops. They're moving immediately. He folded his arms and said, a very bold statement. They can't just march out on words. Then he looked at the item in his hand in surprise and said, this is Green Wind's divine relic. He asked, what should we do? After a while, everyone came out onto the field, and MC, looking at the map, said what he saw. He thought, so there it is, the Green Wind Temple. The building began to glow green. He thought, if it weren't for the minimap, he would never have found it. It was so deep in the wilderness. Then the centaur said, Chief, over there. The protagonist looked at the many angry eyes in front and thought, how did the Cassi know where Green Wind is? Something was definitely wrong here. Then Killing Gaze looked to the side and said there were more of them than he expected. Prince, does he have a plan? He thought Green Wind had told him to draw power from the ankle fragment. There must be something inside the temple. He looked at it and said that he should head there. They must not let the enemy get close. He replied that he understood. Then he went forward and said, Karak, Karma, they must go. They followed him. And Karma shouted, yes, your highness. Then Murder Glare looked at the warriors, raised his sword, and shouted, they must not let anyone get near the temple. Everyone, prepare for battle. Forward. The next second, the warriors charged into battle. The archers began firing their arrows. The centaurs dealt with all the Cassias in their path, and continuing to make their way forward, Karak shouted, Prince, he just needs to get to the temple? He replied, right. Then Karak advanced further and shouted that in that case, they will clear the way, no matter what. 2 Cassia stood in front of them, and he swung his weapon, then attacked several opponents at once. Karma also added blows to the monsters, and the protagonist shouted, "Well done." He followed them and noticed that they were almost there. Then he was surprised, noticing a weapon approaching him. Then he was thrown far to the side by a powerful blow. A huge monster growled loudly, looking at him, and then swung its wooden club again. MC sighed loudly and said, "Damn." He let his guard down. But at that moment, Karak stood in front of him and held an axe in front of him. He shouted, "Prince, is he all right?" He said, "Karak," and he looked at him and said, "He must get up, your highness. It's too early to rest." Then the monster screamed loudly, heading towards him, and Karak swung his axe, blocking its attack. The protagonist drew his weapon and asked, "What is it, Karak?" He looked so cool. Was that all? He concentrated his energy in his weapon and shouted, "Under the royal banner. They are now on the offensive." He directed his energy at Karak and then charged the monster. He cried out loudly as he delivered another slashing blow, then swung his weapon again and added a blow to the head, the force of which caused the ground around him to crack. After that, he turned and shouted, "He must go, Prince. He can rely on him." He replied, "Okay." He then rushed to the temple and a few seconds later ran inside. Then he heard Green Wind shout, "Hurry." He was surprised. Green Wind? She said the Enkidu artifact would guide him. He was surprised to notice a glow near the glove and thought the energy was heading deeper into the temple. He followed the trail and then stopped near a tall tree, whose branches began to move toward him. And then he noticed an object in one of the branches. He was surprised. Was it a dragon's heart? He thought, the source of mana that every dragon possesses, the dragon's heart. He said, "So this is what the ankle fragment is." Then Green Wind appeared before him and said, "The Anger Plains have maintained peace for a long time thanks to the magic of the ankle observer. And this temple is the center of that magic, born from the ankle fragment here. If this place is destroyed, the world will collapse. He must awaken the ancient ankle magic that remained in this temple, and he must not allow that." He asked, "The ancient ankle magic?" Meanwhile, Killing Gaze pointed his weapon forward and shouted, "Don't retreat, they must not let them into the temple." Karak was also engaged in battle, and Karma kept up with the others. At that moment, Green Wind said, "Please, Ninth Prince. He must protect the Anger Plains and her children with the magic she left behind." After that, the protagonist placed his hand on his heart, then found himself in another place and looked around in surprise. He noticed a huge dragon in front of him and said, "Observer Ankel." She directed energy at him and told him to take it. A powerful stream of green energy erupted into the sky from the temple building. The others looked on in confusion. Karak asked, "Prince?" The next second, plant sprouts began to emerge from the ground, and the light spread ever stronger. The next second, Ents emerged from the ground, ready for a fight. They headed straight for Cassia and began delivering powerful attacks. At that moment, Green Wind looked up and said, "Ready." Ankel's ancient magic has awakened. Then she smiled and, looking at the protagonist, said that she was grateful to him, the Ninth Prince. Thanks to him, the Anger Plains exist. At that moment, MC placed his hand on the dragon's heart, and the energy continued to spread around. She wondered, he should wait. What is this? Why is Ankel's magic filling him? Is he trying to absorb its power? But the protagonist didn't answer. His eyes turned white. She flew closer and shouted at him to stop immediately. If he continued, his body wouldn't be able to withstand it. Wounds began to form on his body, and the system reported that his level had increased. Then the wounds began to heal, and Green Wind, looking at this in surprise, said, "His wounds are healing." The system reported several more level increases, and then the protagonist heard a voice. He must conquer, subjugate, and bring it to its knees. Even if it was just the remnant of an ancient dragon, he would prostrate himself before it. The next second, energy aimed straight at his heart, and a brilliant flash of energy spread around. The remaining energy continued to envelop the protagonist, and he opened his eyes. The system reported that he had received the passive skill Dragon Body, level 1. He also received the skill Dragon Blood, as well as the respect of the protagonist, level 2. He received the skill Immunity to All Poisons, level 1. He looked in surprise at the system windows that appeared, then looked at his stats, and wondered, Dragonborn? He thought of a being in whom the dragon gene had awakened and who could wield dragon magic. A Dragonborn. Despite being a Draconian Ashura hybrid, Zephyr's recessive heritage allowed him to awaken the dragon gene. Then Green Wind told him that he had truly attained both the spirit and body of a dragon. She sensed the power of the ankle observer within him, but she was not disappointed. After all, it was a power no one had been able to use, sealed away and dormant for 1,000 years. The successor of the ankle observer. Now she had only one wish. Could he protect the Anger Plains and her children? He looked at her seriously and answered, "Of course." Meanwhile, the battle continued, the Ents fighting with all their might, until the leader of the monsters swung his weapon and cut one of the Ents in two. He screamed loudly, scattering enemies around, and at that moment, the protagonist, having climbed onto the roof of the building, said, "So that's who commands the Cassius. It's definitely him." He then jumped from the roof, ran up to his comrade, and called out to him, "Karak." He was surprised. "Prince?" He said he had business with him. As the battle continued, the huge monster screamed loudly, but the next second, the protagonist attacked it with his gauntlet. But immediately after, the monster swung its arm, throwing the protagonist aside. He flew on and said that for such a small creature, he was surprisingly agile. The monster continued to move forward and strike in front of it, but the protagonist, moving backward, easily dodged each of its blows. He concentrated energy in his gauntlet and said that in that case, he should try to block this too. He used Explosive Fist and then looked at the gauntlet in surprise. He shouted, "What kind of skin is this? Is it that thick?" And the next second, the monster attacked him with its weapon. He jumped back and thought, even the explosion had no effect on this. It was tougher than he expected. Then he began to concentrate energy in his body and said that in that case, let him show him something new. Dragon's blood. The system reported that the Dragonborn's unique skill was activated. The Shatterer is releasing some of its true power. He said that he would bet everything on this attack. He began to concentrate energy in his gauntlet again, and then added, now it's his turn. Karak, Night Summoner. At that moment, he broke through the barrier and aimed straight at the monster. He struck with his weapon, and in response the monster screamed loudly. The protagonist told it to get ready. He kicked off the ground and, leaping into attack, declared that this time everything would be completely different. He used the secret art of the Shaker, the giant piston. Powerful energy exploded around him. Those present watched in amazement, and then the enormous monster fell to the ground from such a powerful blow. The system reported that his level had increased. He had defeated the Drake boss, the Ogre Mustafa. He had earned the title of Ogre Drake Slayer. He then looked at his gauntlet and remarked how much aura he had used. If not for the new level, he would have surely collapsed. He thought that using the ultimate built into the weapon required special movement control, but he didn't have that yet. In other words, the giant piston wasn't even the Shaker's ultimate. It had an even more powerful technique. Then Karak ran up to him and shouted, "Prince, some are running after that guy fell." At that moment, Killing Gaze attacked several Cassius at once, pointing his weapon forward and shouting, "Follow them. If they let them escape, they'll come back to attack again. They mustn't let anyone escape. Kill them all." They rushed after the Cassius. After a while, the battle was over, and the centaurs joyfully celebrated their victory. At that moment, Greenwind flew up to the protagonist and said, "He seems to be having a great time, so what brings him to her?" He replied that he wanted to ask Greenwind a few questions. She replied, "Okay, since he'd fulfilled her request, she'll answer any questions. But could he free her first?" He looked surprised. "Free her?" She said that he'd absorbed Ankel's mana, and she, born from Ankel's magic, was now linked to him. He replied, "Ah, that's the thing. Okay, she should give him a minute." After that, she closed her eyes, then looked at him in surprise. He smiled awkwardly and asked how he could do that. She was surprised. What did he say? And then she screamed, "Oh, temporary overlord, as if eternal. He seriously doesn't know how to do that?" He replied, "Of course not. He wasn't taught how." She screamed, "Then why is he acting like he knows?" In response, he asked her to calm down and said that he would think about it now. Okay, he would see. Greenwind, what is her current state? She placed her hand on her chest and said that she is his, therefore she obeys him. He replied, "No, he meant something else. Is she comfortable? Does she feel any changes?" She replied, "In terms of her special ability or condition, none. However, if she disappears, the Unger planes will lose their life force, for she is the living embodiment of the life that Ankel imposed on the planes." Then he said thoughtfully, perhaps, "Couldn't she stay here on the Unger planes instead of going with him?" She looked at him in confusion, and he added, "There's no need for her to go with him." She looked down and asked, "Is he abandoning her?" He replied, "No, that's not it. He didn't mean that. She should wait a second. She wanted to go with him." Greenwind? She clenched her fists and shouted, "He's her master. Of course she'll accompany him." He replied, "Well, yes." Then he thought, what the hell? Had he accidentally made contact with a spirit? Then he said, "Did she just say she was the symbolic embodiment of the great spell cast over the Unger planes?" She confirmed it. He asked, "Could she create someone in her place?" She looked at him in surprise and then replied that it would take some time, but it was possible. He said, "Great, then she could go with him." Then she added, "But then she wouldn't be able to help him for a while. She'd have to leave most her forces on the Unger planes." He replied, "It's okay." He thought making a contract with a high-ranking nature spirit like her, it was a wonderful opportunity anyway. Then she added, "Lord." He said, "All right, now she should let him ask his questions. How and when did Ankel die?" She looked at him in surprise, then said that she was just a fragment, and as a spirit reborn of nature, she didn't have many of Ankel's memories. She did remember one thing. 1,000 years ago, she was killed. She doesn't remember who the killer was, but she's sure it wasn't another ancient dragon. He was surprised. Killed? He wondered, who could even kill an ancient dragon, a creature rumored to possess godlike power? Then she added, "But Lord, he should speak to her informally from now on." She was uncomfortable with her lord addressing her formally. He asked, "Okay? In any case, as far as she knows, he has become Ankel's successor this time. Does that mean he can also contain the dragon's power?" She thought for a moment, then said that it wasn't really possible, but he might be able to. He already possesses the powers of Ankel, the Polarity Observer, and the Great Enkidu, who opposes her. If he can find a balance between these two opposing forces, then perhaps he can obtain the powers of other ancient dragons. He thought, is she kidding? Is this really possible? Is this the protagonist's so-called plot armor? Then he smiled and said, "Okay, then one last question. Does she know anything about his power?" She said, as she had already said, she didn't retain all of Ankel's memories, so her knowledge is incomplete. The next second, she closed her eyes and her body glowed with a bright light. The protagonist closed them tightly and asked, "What's going on?" Greenwind opened her shining eyes and said, "O Knight of Conquest, born under the fate of kings, he must conquer and rule all that exists. Attack with the power of the king, and it will be his." After some time, the protagonist woke up from the bright rays of the sun. He opened his eyes and, looking at the tree in front of him, wondered what had happened. He clearly remembered talking to Green Wind. Then Green Wind flew up to him and asked, "Master, are you awake?" He sat up and said, "Green Wind," and she said that she did not know why, but it seemed that Ankle's consciousness, remaining within her, manifested last night. That was probably why he lost consciousness. He remembered what happened last night and thought, the power of the king and the Knight of Conquest. So Ankle already knew of his power? Then Green Wind pointed her hand at him and said that he was now her master forever. Therefore, she must tell him something she did not mention yesterday. Then she directed energy at him, and a map appeared in front of him. She said that in the very north of the Enger Plains lies one of the relics of the Watcher Ankle. He asked, "Relics?" She said, "Just like his shaker, it was an artifact imbued with the power of an ancient dragon. Therein lies the Shield of Life. Over 1,000 years ago, the Watcher Ankel bestowed the Shield of Life upon the bravest and fairest centaur warrior. This warrior led his people against enemies in the north, winning many victories without suffering a single wound. However, he was not entirely invulnerable. He did not take the shield to bed, and one night, while sharing a bed with a woman sent by someone, he was stabbed. The Shield of Life was bestowed upon this brave warrior by Ankel herself, and by all accounts, no one but its owner may wield or use it. His followers buried the Shield of Life with the warrior in his tomb in the north. Centuries passed, and the Shield of Life became a legend. And the centaurs named it after the warrior himself, the White Suri. This is the new name for the shield. He was surprised. She had to wait. The White Suri. He thought it was also a legendary artifact that only appeared in the Night Saga backstory. Even veterans like him couldn't find it, the best shield of all. It turned out to be an artifact of an ancient dragon. Then Green Wind flew closer and asked, "Do you know about the White Suri?" He said, "So, where is this tomb?" She said that if she went to the very north of the Enger Plains, she could find it, but first she had to create a replacement. She placed her hand on her chest and added, "She'll start as soon as they finish talking." He then asked how long it would take to create another one. She replied that with his help in activating the protective spell, it should take about 2 days. He said, "Okay, then they can set out in 2 days." He thought it was far north, but quite possible to overcome. No matter what happened, they had to go there. If they found the White Suri, everything would be much easier. After some time, he returned to the field and thought that he could head north under the pretext of hunting the remaining Cassius. The problem was that the Demon King's castle should have already detected the protective spell activated in the temple. They would probably soon send a specialist to inspect the ruins. If the report came today, he would arrive within a week. And then he said that in that case, it would be better to leave before they arrived. Killing Glare approached him next, folded his arms, and said, "Prince, someone from the Demon King's castle has arrived." He looked at him in surprise and asked him, "What, already?" After some time, they entered the temple, and Felicia, coming up to them, asked what was wrong with his face. He looked at her, and she folded her arms across her chest and said it was as if he had seen a ghost. He was surprised. "Felicia, what is she doing here?" She closed her eyes and said, "Enough chatter. First, they should at least say hello." He asked, "Hello?" At that moment, Daphne stepped forward and, lifting the hem of her dress, bowed. She said it was an honor to meet the 9th prince. She was Daphne, daughter of Echo, the 5th concubine. He looked at her in surprise and thought, Daphne, a druid born of a dryad, one of 3 half-sisters who must be obtained at any cost. Then Felicia said she was an exceptional druid and would be useful for this mission, since the guardian spirit of the Enger Plains was involved. Daphne said she would be happy to work with them. MC thought he hadn't expected to meet her here. He needed to make a good impression. Then he said, "But she must wait, Felicia. Wasn't she supposed to be heading to the Jish Mountains to study the anvil that generates thunder?" She replied that she was going to, but he completed his tasks too quickly. Shutra, he's attracting attention. He looked at her in surprise, and then she added, "Honestly, suppressing the Cassia isn't difficult, but what changes everything is that he managed it in 2 days. Usually it takes at least 2 weeks. And since so many unusual events happened during the mission, everyone was in shock. If anyone else had come, they probably would have already been interrogated and followed." He asked, "So that's why she came instead?" She blushed with embarrassment and, looking away, said, "That's not the only reason." She was curious about the magic of this temple and why the Cassia had started acting differently. The protagonist looked at her and thought that beneath her cold exterior lurked a surprisingly warm side. Then he thanked her for her concern and she said, "Anyway, what are his plans now?" He asked. "Plans?" He was going to scout the northern region to see if there were any Cassia left. He thought, and find the White Suri, and then Killing Gaze said that he was with them. He was surprised, but he said that it was their duty. How could the tribe leader not go himself? After that, MC awkwardly scratched the back of his head and said, "Well, he thinks so." Then Felicia said that in that case she would go too. He looked at her in surprise and asked, "Felicia? And she?" She said that it was better to look for living Cassius than dead ones. He answered, of course, the more people, the better. He thought, damn. Searching for the remaining Cassius was supposed to be just an excuse. Then Carrick thoughtfully said, "It seems everything will be more complicated." A few days later, the Cassius appeared on the field again, and the warriors began to fight. Carrick said that he knew it. They were surrounded by monsters. He added that his instincts had not deceived him. The battle continued. The Cassius opened its toothy maw wide, pointing it straight at the protagonist, and he clenched his teeth and said, "Damn," he thought. Where the hell did these creatures come from? He turned around and was dealt a powerful blow with powerful damage, then shouted, "Didn't they kill them last time?" The next second, Geists flew towards him. He asked, "Are flying monsters Geists?" He thought, what a terrifying crowd. He began to concentrate energy in his body and said that they weren't the only ones who could fly. The next second, he took off and used a level 1 wind blessing. The user's body becomes light, allowing them to move at the speed of the wind. Then Green Wind flew up to him and told him to wait. How was he using her magic? He flew even higher, heading straight for the monsters. He used an explosive fist, hitting the monster in the face, sending it flying far back. Then he smiled and said, "Stop getting in his way. He must perish." Then Green Wind spoke the purpose of her existence. After a while, Daphne, shaking with horror, pressed her hands to her chest. She abruptly began to run away from the Geists heading towards her. The next second, Karak grabbed her by the shoulder and with a loud cry, attacked the monster in front of them. Felicia then held her hand out in front of her, creating a magic symbol and said, "Actually, that's quite convenient. She's just about to find them." She directed her attack forward, attacking several monsters at once. After a while, the battlefield was littered with the bodies of monsters, and Felicia walked forward and asked, "Does he see Shutra? He should look at the faint purple glow emanating from them." He was surprised, huh? By the way, yes, there is something like that. She placed her hand on her waist and said that this was probably a type of curse magic. He was surprised. Curses? She said that the stronger they become from this purple glow, the more their life force is absorbed. Plus, they have almost no emotions, so yes, she would call it a curse. Someone is controlling them. With these words, she looked at him. The protagonist, surprised, thought, "What? But they defeated their commander." He asked, "Then who is it this time?" Then Karak told him to wait. "Prince." He looked at him in surprise, and he said, "That girl was tense the whole battle. Perhaps this was her first real battle." The protagonist looked at her in surprise and thought, "Indeed. This Daphne seems much less experienced than the one he remembers." Then she said that she senses the fear of spirits. The further north they go, the stronger the ominous aura. Then Green Wind flew up to the protagonist and said, "Lord, she also senses an ominous energy emanating from the north. Perhaps this entity is the source of this purple glow." After that, Felicia told Shutra that she thinks they'll learn more if they reach the northernmost point. Murderous Gaze folded his arms and added, "How about checking from the watchtower on the northern border?" The protagonist thought he'd only planned to pick up the white Suri, but things had gotten complicated. He said, "Okay, they'll head there." After a while, they climbed the tower, and Felicia, looking ahead, asked what it was. Some kind of large gathering, 200 or 300 of them. Only the undead could gather such a crowd. The protagonist asked, "Undead?" She answered yes, and high-level ones at that, at least lich level. The next second, Daphne suddenly fell to the floor. Felicia called out to her in surprise, and Karak extended his hand to her and asked, "What's wrong? Is she alright?" She hesitantly confirmed it. Felicia said that the ominous energy felt too direct. As she said, she's half spirit, so it affects her more strongly. If the enemy really is high-ranking undead, their forces won't be enough. It's best to retreat for now. Then she stopped in surprise and said, "Someone's coming this way." The protagonist called out to her in surprise, then glanced at the system window that had appeared and asked who it could be. He noticed several objects on the map and asked, "What are they?" Then Karak looked into the distance and said, "Prince? He must see." He was surprised, and Karak said, "Something's flying toward them." Several fire-covered projectiles were flying straight at the tower. The protagonist gritted his teeth and said, "Damn it!" He turned sharply and shouted, "It's a trap! Everyone must leave the tower." The next second, the projectiles hit their target and the tower began to collapse as everyone tried to run as far away as possible. Karak screamed loudly, running forward, and Felicia concentrated energy in her hand and used wind control, lifting everyone into the air. After that, everyone landed, and she, looking at the protagonist, asked, "Is he okay?" He replied, "Everything is fine." Then, Deathglare approached them and said he was grateful for that sixth princess. They had all survived thanks to her magic. She turned away and said she didn't think now was the time for gratitude. It was clear at a glance that they were outnumbered. They needed to get out of here. MC approached her and spoke, but it seemed they were already surrounded. She told him to give her a minute. She would find a way to break through. With that, she concentrated energy in her hand, and the protagonist thought, "Felicia." Then he pulled out a dagger and said, "Okay, he'll hold them off as long as possible." He directed his energy at his comrades and shouted, "Under the royal banner." Deathglare looked at his hands in surprise and asked, "What is this?" The centaur behind him said that power suddenly surged through his body. Then Green Wind flew up to the protagonist and asked if he was going to fight. He answered affirmatively and said that for now, they could only trust Felicia. At that moment, she concentrated energy around her body, and then the protagonist pointed his hand forward and shouted, "Everyone, prepare for battle. They will not retreat." After that, everyone charged into battle, dealing with every monster in their path, and the protagonist, pushing forward, used an explosive fist, scattering the undead in all directions. But the next second, the skeleton was covered in purple energy, and he thought, damn. The skeleton returned the skull to its place, and he thought, this will go on forever. The undead charged at them, and he gritted his teeth, thinking, I need to quickly find the leader who controls these monsters. If they kill him, there will still be hope. The next second, projectiles of dark energy began flying above them, and the protagonist thought in surprise, huh? The next second, flashes of purple energy began to hit the centaurs' bodies, and Karak shouted, what again? A few seconds later, everyone lay lifeless on the ground, and the huge monster walked right over their bodies. MC hid behind a stone wall, and noticing him, thought he'd found him. He's the leader, right? The next second, murderous gaze appeared behind the huge monster, ready to strike, but then the monster spun around, striking him with its hand and throwing him to the ground. Then, Karak stood before him and swung his weapon. He struck, but his hands trembled as the monster responded with an attack, throwing him into the stone wall. The protagonist then leaped into the fray. He concentrated energy in his glove, then felt the energy of green wind and thought that he was grateful that he himself had come. Bonehead. He was finished. He thrust an explosive fist forward, then looked in surprise at the motionless monster, who swung his arm and sent him crashing to the ground. MC began to rise and, placing his hand on his chest, thought, what's wrong with him? He's strong. They can't handle him. Then Felicia approached him and said, that's enough, Shatra. He can rest. After that, the monster looked at her in surprise, and the protagonist called her. She concentrated several magical symbols in front of herself and said that she would deal with him herself from now on. He must come, Bonehead. Pulses of energy flew from her hand, and then she used explosion. Valkaroba screamed loudly, and then swung his hand, trying to throw her back, but Felicia flipped in the air, then directed wind control forward. The monster pointed his hand at her. She said, snap. She concentrated a huge ball of energy above her head, and then directed it at several parts of Valkaroba's body. Watching this unfold, MC thought, Felicia is even more incredible than he thought. It's crazy. She handled him single-handedly. Then he looked away in surprise, noticing Daphne, whose body was covered in energy. She came closer and asked, is he all right, His Majesty? He said, Daphne, and then she used the Dryad's blessing. The energy was directed at all of his comrades lying on the ground. They began to rise, and the protagonist, clenching his fist, joyfully thought, this is the unique aura of dryads. He said, finally, she's making her contribution, Daphne. Then, he looked in surprise at the system window that appeared, which said, Level 1 Enhancement Skill Acquired. Several flashes of energy flew past his body. He asked, what? Then his body sparkled, and he wondered why he was suddenly learning skills. The system reported, Level 1 Spirit Rescue Skill Acquired. The power of the spirit resides within the user. All abilities are enhanced. He looked at his hand and thought that his entire body was seething with power. In Night Saga, a person can only have one spirit at a time, but now he has the spirit of life and the spirit of wind. He smiled and said, it's probably all because he's the protagonist. Meanwhile, Felicia continued the battle, sending several fiery blasts at the monster, and then it dodged a swing of its huge hand. She concentrated the next attack in her hand and said, insolent idiot, he must die. Then she looked ahead in surprise, noticing the monster's hand approaching her. Then Karak shouted loudly and swung his weapon, hitting the monster. The protagonist also joined the battle and said that she was good, Felicia. She looked at him in surprise and asked, Shutra? He concentrated energy in his hand and told her to leave the finishing blow to him. He aimed an explosive fist at the monsters, and then the creature fell to the ground. After that, Karak laughed loudly and shouted, they can really win. And MC looked at him and asked, they'll be honest, his fist defeated him. He laughed and shouted, really? And then he ran forward and shouted that he'd chop off his head himself. But the next second, he was surprised, noticing the emerging energy, followed by a powerful pulse of energy erupting from the monster's body, hitting Karak. The protagonist called out to him in alarm, then began to shield himself from the dark energy flying around him. A clot of this energy hit his face, and he fell to the ground. Noticing this, Felicia asked, what? Beginning to become noticeably nervous, she said, no, Shutra. And at that moment, the monster rose to its feet again. Meanwhile, green wind flew through the forest. She flew to the right place and thought she had found it, the warrior's grave. Then the huge monster turned around, and Felicia, concentrating several more magical symbols around itself, asked how dare it look away from its opponent. Its enemy is she, and she concentrated all the magical symbols in one place and used a powerful triple blast. The energy was directed at the monster, and then it suddenly appeared behind her. Felicia turned around in surprise, and then Valkaroba delivered a powerful blow. But she managed to put up a barrier and said, damn idiot. The monster continued to strike again and again, and the rest of the undead managed to get to their feet, surrounding Felicia. At this moment, MC continued to lie unconscious on the ground. Inside himself, he heard a voice. He must get up. Master, this is not the time to lie around. He was surprised, and Green Wind flew up to him and told him to quickly awaken the power of Ankle. He asked what she was talking about. How should he awaken the power? She told him to remember, her master. He knows the answer. A dragon's heart lay before her, and MC uttered, dragon's blood. A flash of energy flew forward, and Felicia, fleeing from the undead, was surprised to see a clot of green energy dispatching all the monsters in front of her, then stopping next to the protagonist's body. He propped himself up on his hands and looked ahead in surprise. Noticing the shield, he thought, a white Suri? Green Wind flew up to him. He asked how she was. She said that since the very beginning of the battle, she had been searching for the grave where the white Suri lay. Of course, It had been foolhardy to leave him alone, but she had managed to find the white Suri and get him to acknowledge his new master. He smiled, looking at her, and said, "Green Wind, she." Before he could finish, she replied that he would praise her later. For now, they would deal with the creature before them. At that moment, the enormous monster swung its arm to strike, and the protagonist jumped to the side and screamed loudly. He rose up and shouted that he had to stop. He noticed a clot of energy concentrated in the monster's mouth. He thrust his hand forward and shouted, "Why so fast?" Then a stream of energy hit the protagonist directly, and Felicia called out to him in alarm. After that, smoke scattered in all directions, and the protagonist remained in his place, holding his shield in front of him. Then he looked around and was surprised. It was energy. Green Wind flew next to him and said that the fragment of Ainkel had transformed his body into that of a dragonborn, and now he would need yet another new power. "Can you sense it, her lord?" He looked at the shield, and she added, "Ainkel magic, which has been stored in the white Suri for 5,000 years. He replied, "Yes, this is complete madness, in the best sense of the word." Then he concentrated the energy in his hand and said, "Hey, bonehead, he needs to keep up the cool act, because this time he's going to completely destroy him." After that, the protagonist looked at the shield and said he'd take a look. It was supposed to be like this. He then sent it flying, attacking several monsters in front of him. Felicia turned around and said, "Damn it." The next second, the huge monster screamed loudly and swung its weapon. But the next second, wings sprouted from the sides of the shield, and MC, concentrating energy in his glove, flew towards the monster, asking, "Where is it looking?" He delivered an explosive fist attack to the monster's skull, and then Valkyroba moved his hand forward, directing several fire attacks. The protagonist easily dodged this, holding the shield in his hand. After that, he sent it at the monster, attacking its head, and the shield began to attack the monster again and again. Then the protagonist concentrated energy in his hand and used a giant piston. The monster screamed loudly, and energy began to burst out of its body. After that, the protagonist moved his hand forward and said that this would finish him off. He waved his fingers, and a bright column of green energy erupted from the sky, passing through the monster's head. An explosion followed, and the system announced that he had defeated the Skeleton King Valkyroba boss. His level had increased. The protagonist's body began to glow, and he sighed with relief. He had said he was so arrogant, but he was nothing. The system then announced that he had earned the title of Level 1 Kingslayer. The next second, Felicia ran up to him and said, "Shutra, it's done. The curse has been completely lifted. They should go while they fight among themselves." He replied, "Okay, Felicia." After a while, they gathered around the fire, and Felicia, looking at the shield in front of the protagonist, asked, "So that's the white Suri?" He confirmed it. A murderous look uttered, "It's amazing to think the legend of the white Suri is true." Karak was enjoying his meal at that moment, and Daphne said that the white Suri emanated a powerful life force. If her feelings were correct, he hadn't yet revealed his full power. The protagonist asked, "Is that so?" He thought, so white Suri was limiting himself to match him, just like a shaker. He was excited to see how much stronger he would become. Then Felicia folded her arms and smiling said, "In any case, this belongs to him, Shutra. She won't report this to the Demon King's castle, so he must guard it." He smiled and thanked her, and then a murderous glare said, "Ninth Prince?" He asked, "Yes." He said that from this day forward, they will recognize the Ninth Prince as the successor to the Great Warrior, the White Suri. Let him just call. They will join him whenever necessary. He replied, "Okay, he will count on them." He thought, "Excellent, it seems everything has ended well again." Oh, right. He almost forgot. The grave of the Great Warrior White Suri is still the most fun part, farming. After some time, he looked at the sword in his hand and said, "This must be the last one now." At that moment, Green Wind shouted, "That's not all." He hadn't praised her yet. He was surprised and looked at her awkwardly. She was indignant. How could he have forgotten such a thing? In response, he laughed awkwardly and apologized. After that, he patted her on the head and said, "Well done, Green Wind." Thanks to her, they were able to win. He greatly appreciated that. She replied that this time she forgave him, but in return, he must praise her again. She reached out to his hand, and he continued to stroke it and said, "Of course, she did well. Very well. Green Wind, she is the best." And so, the incident in the northern region came to an end. However, something continued to bother him. Was Valkyroba the true cause of the purple death energy? If so, then why was he trying to attack the north? And how did he even know the secret of the small shrine? Nothing is clear yet, but one day he will learn the truth. The true nature of the purple death energy. After returning from the northern border, everyone became very busy, and time flew by. Killing Gaze was preparing to lead his tribe's warriors and head north. For some reason, the mission to destroy the Cassia herd only began now. He, too, set off north with Killing Gaze, and it took him about half a month to destroy the Cassia herd. After some time, Felicia asked thoughtfully, did she think he had gotten stronger again, Shutra? And he smiled and said, "Well, he's growing after all." "How did the temple exploration go, Felicia?" She replied, "Not bad." She had made remarkable discoveries. The magic cast on the temple belonged to none other than Ainkel. Ainkel's observer, one of the 6 ancient dragons. MC asked, "Really? Incredible." She wondered what that strange expression was. Did he really know? He asked. What? Him? He's hearing this for the first time. And then Green Wind, she said, Master, he's acting strange. He said okay, they will move on to the report. After some time, the Demon King's castle. The girls ran forward and shouted, Lady Felicia, the 6th princess. She is here, Felicia. She looked at the girls and, folding her arms, said, Yes, how are they? Are everything all right? They answered yes. And what about her? She asked, Have they eaten? Then Karak said that this place is still the same. The protagonist agreed. And indeed. Then Green Wind said, Lord, her heart is pounding. Lord, my chest is trembling. Lord, are they really allowed to leave the Anger Plains? He sighed and replied, It seems only they have changed. She shouted for him to say that he will not, Lord. Then Karak asked, Prince, did they do something wrong? He looked to the side in surprise, and Karak, looking at the girls, asked why they were looking at them so strangely. He thought, Succubi are Anastasia's people, the head of one of the 3 main factions, the 4th princess, Anastasia. During the massacre, the Anastasia faction was the most numerous. Even Felicia and her twin brother, Sylvan, were part of it. Then he said, judging by how much attention they were paying him, it seemed that what happened on the Anger Plains had already reached Anastasia. He should get used to it, Karak. From now on, they will be paid even more attention. After some time, the Public Service Department. The head of the Public Service Department, Isabel, said, 4th Prince, his merit level has increased to 10, his monthly allowance has increased from 500 gold to 900, and the number of facilities he can use in the Demon King's castle has expanded. He can now access the treasury, he said, meaning the treasury has finally opened. He laughed lightly and said, Good. It's been a while since you spent a lot of money. After some time, the armory manager Igor said, since your community's merit level is 10, he can use the first treasury. Merit points are usually required to purchase weapons, but he can buy this with gold. Please, he needn't rush, your highness. After that, they went inside, and the protagonist said, Karak, he can choose whatever he needs. He was surprised, right? He said the better his equipment, the more useful it is. He ran forward and shouted, He got it! Wait a minute. Looking at the items, the protagonist thought, as they say, you can't skimp on equipment. Then he looked at the item and said, Well, this is not bad. This has resistance to all elemental attacks. The most important thing is that it's lightweight and doesn't interfere with the use of the beast god's melee art. Good. Yes, there is armor under the clothes. Now the last thing remains. Blacksmith Kator asked, Is it him? MC thought, well, since the beast god's melee art involves a lot of legwork, normal defensive postures will get in the way. He said yes. How long will it take to make this? And Kator folded his arms and said that the design is simple. He can finish it in 2 days. He answered, okay. What materials does he recommend? In response, he suggested making it from dragon skin and scales. The protagonist was surprised. What? He thought, dragon skin and scales? Was he kidding? Where could he get something so rare? And then the blacksmith said, It just so happens, your highness, that materials arrived today in his name. He was just about to use this. MC was surprised. He must wait. What do you mean, arrived in his name? He asked in response, and he didn't know. Lord Ishugard ordered that the dragon skin and scales be delivered directly to him. He thought, Ishugard, the greatest swordsman of the demon lands, the master of the sword, the elder of the most powerful warrior race of Asuras, and a legendary warrior who trained the demon king Mitra himself in swordsmanship. After some time, they went outside, and Karak asked why this legendary figure was helping them. The protagonist asked in response, how should he know? He was surprised. Even he doesn't know. If the Sword Lord became his supporter, that would be encouraging. He replied, that would be nice. Then he thought, but why? In Night Saga, the Asura side never supported anyone. Was he reacting because the Demon King had shown interest in him? Then a man ran up to him and shouted, Ninth Prince, breaking news. The protagonist looked at him and asked, what's the rush? What happened? There'll be an audit tomorrow morning, he asked. Again? He replied, right, that and his achievements on the Anger Plains were remarkable. At this audience, all 3 participants will be thanked. The protagonist was surprised. 3? Who else besides himself and Felicia? He replied, His Highness the Second Prince, Zephyr, has returned. Shutra was terrified. This was the prince who would kill everyone and kill him. And he would see him here? Time passed. He was sitting in the palace, but he was still depressed. Karak asked if he was really okay. He hadn't been feeling well since yesterday. He only sighed heavily in response, and looking at his hands trembling with fear, thought that he knew he would meet him one day. But he never imagined he would be so worried. Karak turned to another servant and asked if another prince was supposed to arrive today. He answered that they said His Highness the Second Prince would enter directly, without passing through the waiting room. Felicia entered the room and said that Zephyr was special in many ways, but his merits were also considerable. He looked up at her and she told him not to lose heart. Let him show everyone what he is capable of. Soon the audience ceremony began. Everyone gathered in the throne room. Felicia and Shutra entered the hall, and one of the servants solemnly announced their presence. As MC walked, he wondered if he was already so nervous, how he would cope with what would happen next. Anastasia sat on the balcony and watched him. He knelt before the king, greeting him, and mentally encouraged himself. He had to cross this mountain. Isabella announced the arrival of the next prince. The second prince, Zephyr Ragnaros, entered. Shutra and his sister glanced at him, and he thought, well, here we are. This is the main character of the Demon Lands arc in the game, Zephyr. The prince walked to the center of the throne room, and Isabella said that they would now review the accomplishments of the princes and the princess. As for the second prince, he had accomplished a lot in this mission. As expected, Zephyr's accomplishments were impressive. His merits alone were enough to justify an audience. Felicia and Shutra's accomplishments were then announced, and the issue at the northern border attracted everyone's attention. But the main event of the day wasn't their accomplishments. The Demon King gave Shutra a task, which surprised everyone. This was an unprecedented situation. He personally gave him the task during the audience ceremony. MC, like everyone else, was confused. His task was to investigate Grambane Fortress in the Dwarven Kingdom. While mining, a path leading to Thunderbane Fortress was discovered. He needed to fortify the passage and explore the fortress's interior. Isabella explained all the details of the task to him. He was to leave within 7 days. Fortunately, he knows Thunderbane Fortress well. When he played Night Saga, it was one of the key strongholds of the Dwarven Kingdom. Isabella said that the task was originally assigned to the 27th Exploration Squad under the command of General Kashubal, but he died during the investigation, leading to the failure of the mission. According to reports, the main cause was poison gas poisoning. Therefore, he must take adequate countermeasures and ultimately secure Thunderbane Fortress. Shutra sighed heavily and wondered what was going on. Kashubal was a general of dragon descent, and he was entrusting him with a mission that even he could not handle. Why not entrust it to Zephyr, who was a dragon on his mother's side? After that, he met with his sister, and she said that something was clearly wrong. There was no way he could have angered their father? He didn't understand what she meant, and she explained to him that Zephyr would usually take full responsibility for such a mission. Karak said that since the general had failed, it must be an incredibly difficult task. Felicia noted that it was too dangerous to go on such a mission alone. He thought so too, didn't he? He was confused and couldn't even answer. And then she, slightly shyly, declared that she would go with him. She's a little busy, but if that's what he wants, she can make time. Karak noticed that the prince hadn't even responded yet, and she immediately ordered him to shut up. MC smiled and thanked her for that, and then Kadarov approached them and told the prince that he wanted to accompany him to this place, but he just hoped he didn't think his offer was impudent. Would that be acceptable? Felicia said his name in surprise, and Shutra said that the composition of the participants for this mission had already been determined. Kadarov awkwardly scratched the back of his head and left, apologizing for interfering, and Felicia turned to her brother and asked why he did that. Wouldn't it have been better if you went with them? He's one of the few male sirens, and he's competent. He would be useful. He sighed and thought that she was right. He's one of the most powerful siren mages, but this guy is a secret follower of Anastasia. He is a very fanatical follower whose abilities specialize in infiltration and espionage. At this time, Kadarov used teleportation magic to return to the fourth princess and report everything to her. MC smiled and thought that since they sent him, they were extremely concerned about all of this. After listening to the report, Anastasia said that it seemed he was much more cautious than expected. After that, the three of them moved into the house, and Felicia asked Shutra if he knew anything about Thunderbane Fortress. He answered her that he only knew that those fierce dwarves who fought dragons once lived there. Karak asked if they didn't serve as guardians of Enkidu's treasures. The princess said that there are many dwarven states. There is a supreme dwarven kingdom, to which Thunderbane Fortress belonged. It fought dragons to protect its cities and treasures. They even managed to kill several real dragons. And for the record, dragons and elder dragons are practically completely different species. Karak looked at her with delight and asked, "Does that mean she can kill dragons too?" She looked away, telling him that if she had enough time and resources, she probably could, and then he noted that judging by her words, she can't kill them. She immediately pointed her finger at him indignantly and exclaimed, "Does he think dragons are some kind of run-of-the-mill monsters?" Even that dwarven high kingdom eventually fell in the war against the dragons. The orc laughed and noted that she knew a lot. She told him that, of course she knew a lot. Thunderbane Fortress is constantly mentioned in the research of dwarven relics, and if they do everything right, they will hit the jackpot. She was so delighted that Karak noticed she was already drooling with anticipation, and MC thought with a smile that they were going to hit the jackpot. In the game, Thunderbane Fortress is one of the famous so-called honey dungeons. Due to the battle with dragons, part of the fortress collapsed, so high-quality weapons and treasures are still buried inside, untouched. Moreover, the fortress contains something he desperately needs now. This weapon, created specifically for killing dragons, deadly to those in whose blood flows, the Dragon Slayer sword. He must obtain it to fight Zephyr, who bears the blood of a dragon. He must possess this sword. After that, they set off, and when they were already at the entrance to the fortress, Shutra donned new dragon-scale armor and asked his comrades if they were ready. Seeing their confident looks, he put on a respirator and said that they were coming in. They found themselves in a long tunnel, completely filled with fog. Karak worriedly noted that the fog seemed to be thickening here, and Felicia told him that it wasn't fog, but poisonous gas from the mines. But it was worse than she thought. There was no time limit, so why not go slowly? MC agreed with her, and Karak noted that the color of this fog was somehow strange. Was it supposed to be yellow? Shutra turned to him in surprise, and the orc immediately coughed, then fell unconscious along with another member of the squad. MC became nervous, as he didn't understand what was happening, and when the gas surrounded them, Felicia cursed and said that the type of poisonous gas suddenly changed. She used a wind spell to disperse all the gas, but immediately afterward a new stream of poisonous fog gushed at them, this one even stronger. Shutra, starting to slowly lose consciousness, called out to the princess, and then they all fell unconscious. The monsters that inhabited this place were just waiting for this. They approached the squad, and judging by how freely they moved, they were resistant to this gas. But putting MC to sleep wasn't that easy. He looked up at them and asked, "So they killed General Kashabal?" The monster stared at him in bewilderment, then a flying shield pierced it from behind, and that dealt with the rest of the monsters. Green Wind told Shutra to hurry. His fainting spell was very convincing. He asked her to stop, after which he began clearing the tunnel. He instantly dealt with all the monsters with the flying shield, and noticed that these idiots used a pretty strong poison. He almost put himself in danger. Luckily, he had resistance to all level 1 poisons. He took off his respirator, and immediately after that, the tunnel began to collapse, and he nervously looked around, not knowing what to do now. A system window appeared in front of him, and he exclaimed that their jokes never ended. Then he ordered Green Wind to protect the remaining members of the squad. She answered him that she understood everything, and he thought that he did not know what was happening here. But first, they needed to get out of here. He used Dragon Blood, threw 2 members of the squad over his shoulders, and then ran forward as fast as he could, following the map. He found the entrance to Thunderbane Fortress, immediately after which he returned to the others, and Green Wind told him to hurry. The situation was abnormal. He picked up 2 girls. Only Karak remained in the tunnel, which he could not take yet. He told him to wait, and then rushed to the entrance of the fortress. When he carried all the girls, he sighed with relief and was about to go after Karak, but suddenly there was a roar. The entrance to the fortress collapsed, cutting him off from the orc. He immediately rushed to the collapse, but Green Wind blocked his path and told him to calm down. Doesn't he have the spell he used last time on the Enger Plains? An idea occurred to him. He could use the night summoning. Immediately after that, a rift appeared above his head, and after a few seconds, an orc's head appeared from it, and then he fell to the floor. MC immediately rushed to him worriedly, quickly checked his condition and breathed a sigh of relief since he wasn't seriously injured. Now that everyone was together, he was finally able to calm down and think, what just happened? Who are these strange guys? He had never seen such creatures in the entire history of the game. The girls began to slowly come to their senses, and he thought that first, he needed to deal with the main problem. He needed to remove the poison from them before it was too late. But the monsters were already here. They surrounded him in a crowd, and he cursed. One of the monsters pounced on him from behind. He used an explosive fist to deal with it, and seeing the death of their comrade, the other monsters were in no hurry to approach him. Shutra armed himself with a shield and called them all idiots, to which the monsters responded with growls, and he furiously ordered them to shut their filthy mouths and attack all at once. He didn't have time. He readied his fist, imbuing it with power, and then slammed it onto the floor, causing a shockwave that dealt with the monsters closest to him. After that, Green Wind took action. She deftly slipped through the ranks of monsters, literally cutting them apart, but they still didn't end. MC screamed, preparing another blow, and then attacked. Soon, Felicia woke up. Shitra had been healing her the whole time. She called out to him and asked what happened here. He smiled and told her not to worry, nothing special had happened. After they completed the detoxification, they launched a full-scale assault on the fortress. Their first target was the Thunderbane Fortress Command Center, and to get there, they had to choose one of 2 diverging paths. One path was long, with almost no obstacles, and the other was short, teeming with countless traps. Felicia asked him where they were going, and he glanced at the map, thinking that if they wanted to be on the safe side, they should take the long way. But a loud, repetitive beeping sound was heard, and MC noted that it was too early to relax, and Karak looked around in fear, asking what the sound was. The girl told him that it was a signal for an attack on a key structure in the ruins, and Shutra said that it meant someone was going through the dungeons right now. Felicia was perplexed by this, and MC ordered Karak to come here, raise his shield, and lead the movement. He was surprised that he was entrusting this to him, and he smiled and told him not to worry and just trust him. As long as he did what he said, nothing would happen to him. The security system activated, and the stone dragon head at the very end of the corridor they needed to go through began spewing flames, which they protected themselves from with their shields. Then various traps awaited them, from sharp spikes in the floor to arrows shooting from the walls. There were many, and since Karak was leading, he was very tired. They all cheerfully followed him and thanked him, and he exclaimed that he almost died. They approached the huge doors, and Shutra said that, thanks to his efforts, they quickly reached the command center. Mimi looked around and told Lady Felicia that something was wrong. The gargoyles that should guard this place were gone. She agreed, and MC suggested they go inside and look around for now. They found themselves in a spacious hall, with a skeleton against one of the walls. Seeing this, Shutra immediately called out to Felicia, and she said that this must be the last head of the Thunderdoom Fortress. He was probably left alone to manage everything here while the dwarves evacuated. Mimi called out to her and pointed to a huge sphere in the center of the room, saying there was something strange here. She walked up to it and touched her chin in confusion, asking, "Did the dwarves make this? It looked like something needed to be inserted here to activate it." MC examined the body and told her there was something here, some kind of key. Felicia now understood what needed to be inserted into this sphere. As soon as she brought the key to it, a reaction occurred. There was a splash at the point of contact. The sphere became covered in sparks and began to glow brightly, and then numerous screens appeared around them, showing different rooms of the fortress. Shutra looked around in surprise, and Felicia delightedly said that the more she saw of it, the more dwarven technology amazed her. How far ahead of their time were they? A strange sound was heard. Karak immediately looked around, and Daphne approached one of the screens and told them to look at it. It looked like a battle was happening not far from here. Right now, monsters were fighting gargoyles, and Felicia asked Shutra if these were the same monsters he had fought earlier. Karak noticed that there were so many of them, and MC frowned, wondering what they were trying to achieve. Karak noticed a silhouette and asked if that huge thing was a dragon. MC approached it closer and saw something amazing. In the huge hall lay the body of a dragon with a spear stuck into it. He thought that they had finally met. This is the masterpiece of the Dragon Slayer series, the Spear of Ascalon. The black dragon Patazon is greedy and vicious, which matches his size. He is the dragon that has taken the most active position in the war against the Dwarven Kingdom. Patazan and his legion relentlessly targeted Thunderbane Keep, and eventually succeeded in breaching the outer wall. Having penetrated the keep, Patazan led the way, unchecking his strength, and this proved his fatal mistake, a moment born of his boundless arrogance. Spark, Thunderbane Keep's strongest warrior, seized the opportunity and plunged his Dragon Slayer spear into Patazan's chest. However, when he died, his legion went berserk, and the dwarves had no choice but to abandon the keep and flee. Thus, Thunderbane Keep became a vast tomb for Patazan and countless dwarves. Karak asked, "So that dragon is Patazan, and Ascalon is protruding from his chest?" Shutra confirmed it, and Felicia, turning her attention to another screen, said that if they were fighting there now, perhaps those idiots were now hunting Ascalon. They dared to attack them, and then think they can just achieve their goal? She would never allow that. Shutra asked if they really couldn't subdue that gargoyle. She told him that no matter how annoying it was, they couldn't do anything about it. They were in control of it now. They went into that hall and hid behind the wall, watching the battle. Felicia noted that it seemed like the fortress lord had transferred all powers to that golem right before his death, probably because it was a high-ranking guard. Maybe they should just wait and see? They came all this way because of Ascalon, but the situation wasn't the best. He disagreed with her. Rather, this was their chance. She didn't understand what he meant, and he said that there were too many uncertain variables to just sit around doing nothing. He ran out of hiding, telling them to stay here and that he would be back soon, then ran past the gargoyles and opened the map. If he holds Ascalon first, they can take advantage no matter how the battle turns out. If the dungeon guardians win, they won't even have to fight. They can simply hunt down the remnants of those black idiots. And if the black ones win, they can simply assess the situation and either fight or leave. He checked the map. He was almost there, and Patazan's body appeared in front of him, but he didn't notice that the golem was already above him. The guard hit it with his hammer, luckily missing, and then MC took off running, and the golem followed him. He turned to it excitedly, saying that he didn't want to fight it, but it didn't listen and struck again. Thinking he had hit, he stopped, but there was no one at the place where he had struck, which confused him. Suddenly, green wind flew past his head, and Shutra, riding on a shield, glided through the air. He called her GW and said she was just in time, and she angrily asked him not to call her that. He said that shortening names was in fashion now, and she exclaimed that she didn't care about fashion. They headed straight for Ascalon. MC stood on the dragon's scales and approached the spear. It looked even more dazzling in person. He grabbed the spear and was about to run away with it, but it was stuck, and no matter how much strength he applied, he couldn't pull it out. He gritted his teeth and thought, why was it so hard for him? He decided to put all his remaining points into strength. He screamed, trying again to pull the spear out, and because of this, an even greater glow arose, and the golem noticed it. One more try, and Shutra finally pulled the spear out, after which a bright beam of light shot into the sky, and everyone froze in surprise, even a stranger in a hooded robe. Now MC had Ascalon, a work of art from the Dragon Slayer series. A giant spear pierced the heart of the black dragon Patazan, filled with resentment, determination, and the fury of all the dwarves in Thunderbane Fortress. Shutra smiled, rejoicing at having achieved his goal, and suddenly the dragon rose from the dead. The unknown man in the hood was a necromancer. He had revived the dragon. Patazan's eyes flashed, and he roared loudly, causing everyone to immediately scatter in fear, and MC nervously exclaimed that this couldn't be. How could Patazan, who had died hundreds of years ago, be here? He saw the necromancer nearby and wondered, who the hell is that? Everything beneath his feet shook. Patazan took flight, towering over him, and beginning to gather energy in his mouth, and he grew nervous, realizing it was the Purple Death. Streams of energy flew across the room. They pierced the bodies of the gargoyles and shattered them. One of these streams wanted to injure Shutra, but Green Wind quickly took it. He looked around and wondered what was going on here. Why was the energy of Purple Death emanating from Patazan? He looked back for a second to check the situation, and a golem suddenly appeared in front of him, Fortunately, it was aimed not at him, but at Patizon. Running up to the dragon, the golem immediately struck with its hammer, and MC, watching them in shock, wondered why they started fighting each other. He returned to his team and Felicia ran up to him worriedly, asking what happened there. Shouldn't the dragon be dead? He answered her that it looked like someone resurrected Patizon with some kind of witchcraft. She, shocked, asked who would need this, and he answered her that he didn't know either. What kind of conspiracy is this? He thought that the only thing he was sure of was that this purple death energy was the same one they encountered on the Enger Plains. He said that in any case, this was no time to mess around. They needed to kill it quickly, while it was still incomplete. Felicia, confused, said that she felt that his mana was unstable. But how were they supposed to defeat it? He answered that if it was a zombie dragon, there must be a core that controlled the flow of mana. If they destroyed this core, they could defeat it. At that moment, the dragon knocked the golem to the floor, gathering energy in its mouth. Shutra, noticing this, cursed quietly and waved his hand, excitedly ordering everyone to run. He was now using dragon breath. After that, a huge stream of purple flame rushed forward, broke through the wall of the fortress, and came out, leaving behind a deep mark on the floor and a hole. For a second, everything was quiet. The dragon seemed to look around for opponents, and then roared loudly. Luckily, MC and his team managed to hide. Karak nervously noted that he had said that he was not fully formed, and he apologized to him. He also didn't think he would be so strong. He looked at the spear and thought that this was bad. The longer they delayed, the stronger he became. How could they defeat him? Suddenly, the spear glowed, and ancient writing swirled around it, changing its shape. A stone with a sharp spike on the end covered his hand, and Felicia asked in surprise, "Has the weapon's shape changed?" Shutra asked, "Can she distract him for a while?" He thought he could handle him. After that, Felicia took action. She threw several fireballs at the dragon and continued to advance, attacking him from all sides. He growled in rage, no longer knowing how to avoid it, and then MC approached him from behind and sensed Ascalon's will. He should be able to finish him off with one blow, but he didn't expect the monster to notice him. Patizon swung his tail, throwing him to the side, and he hit the wall with a crash, causing his comrades to worry about him. Meanwhile, he coughed up blood and wondered if he had been too hasty. The dragon was about to slap him, but suddenly there was a crash and the floor crumbled into pieces. When Shutra opened his eyes, he saw the golem, badly maimed by the recent battle, return to action. He swung his hammer and hit the dragon with all his might, piercing its body with an electric discharge, then hit it again, and then it was thrown aside. The dragon growled in rage. The fight continued. Meanwhile, Felicia and Green Wind ran to Shutra to help him. Felicia immediately began to heal him and exclaimed that he said he would deal with him. What is this anyway? He apologized to her, and she said that this is enough. They need to retreat. They can't handle this dragon. He answered her that they can do it, and when he coughed, she worriedly asked him not to be stubborn. What can he even do in such a state? He said that he was hasty. The more urgent the matter, the more they need to retreat. Let her just help him one more time. This time he will not make a mistake. He confidently stood up and called Green Wind, then stood on his shield and flew straight towards the dragon. The fight between the giants was still going on. He told Green Wind that they would go around them as far as possible so that he would not notice them. At that very moment, the golem lost its second arm. The dragon fired a beam of energy at it, and the fortress's defender fell. But that wasn't all. Felicia replaced the golem and cast a spell, creating a huge wall of fire beneath the dragon's feet. At that very moment, Green Wind began circling near its head, distracting it. She flew to the side, and it opened its mouth wide, preparing to attack her, and she gave the signal to Shutra. Thanks to his distraction, he was able to get close to it with the help of dragon blood, and thought that they needed to hurry, and besides, just once was enough. Like that spark long ago, just once. The dragon turned its gaze to him. The spear was already very close, and then it pierced the dragon's body a second time, this time leaving nothing left of its neck. Felicia exclaimed with delight that he had succeeded, after which the dragon's head fell, and MC received a notification about the victory over the dragon zombie boss, Patizon. His level had been raised several times. He caught his breath and looked at the spear, thinking, is this the power of a dragon slayer? The system notified him that he had received the title Dragon Slayer, and that masked stranger showed up. He said that he couldn't believe that he had actually defeated him. Shutra turned around in fear. He hadn't even noticed him approaching, and he wondered if it had been a mistake to just watch because the second prince hadn't arrived. MC noted that he was the one who resurrected Patizon, and he said that none of that mattered. He would take everything that was left. His spear burst into blue flames. He swung it, and Shutra immediately assumed a defensive stance. Then there was a roar. Blue flames pierced the walls, everything around, and intended to take both the dragon's body and the party with them, but this didn't happen. MC was confused. He wondered what had just happened. His attack suddenly disappeared. The stranger froze in place, coughed up blood, and then his body split into two and he fell. Shutra didn't even understand what happened. And then a gray-haired man approached him and said that it seemed like he arrived just in time. At the sight of him, MC's eyes widened in surprise. He greeted him with a smile. It was the Sword Master. He is the last bastion protecting the Asura Shrine and the mentor of the Demon King Mitra. The Swordmaster Ishigurd was a being in the game comparable to the ancient laws. He was an incredibly strong and extraordinary person, but he existed only in the backstory, so he could not be met in the main plot. He existed only as a background. Even when Zephyr Ragnaros became the Demon King and when Locke invaded the Demon Lands, he did not appear. He is the game's strongman, shrouded in mystery, a monster from whom even the Demon King could learn. The Swordmaster Ishigurd. The man approached the princess and noticed that she had grown a lot. He picked her up and said with a smile that she had been very small the last time they met, which made her embarrassed and indignantly asked him to put her in her place. He only laughed and said that she swears if she were still a child. While she was burning with shame, the Swordmaster turned to Shutra and asked if he liked the gift. He answered with a smile that he was very grateful for the dragon skin. It made very good equipment. Monsters approached him from behind, but he noticed them at the last moment, and then a loud sound was heard. All the monsters around them began to explode, which confused Karak, and MC said that they needed to leave quickly. It turns out that the masked stranger was still alive. Just before a powerful explosion occurred, collapsing the ceiling of the fortress, they managed to repel the attack and survive. The Swordmaster irritably noted that it was so noisy, and then asked, "Is everything okay?" Shutra confirmed it, and Felicia asked, "An explosion out of nowhere? You can't understand these idiots. What are they even trying to achieve?" MC thought about the stranger's words. Was it a mistake to just observe because the second prince didn't come? He said something strange. Ascalon wasn't his target because he didn't even show interest in it, so what did they need? And then an idea occurred to him. He told Felicia that perhaps their target was the second prince. She frowned slightly and asked why he thought so. He told her that the guy with the spear said that they were observing because the second prince didn't come. Isn't it strange that they showed up now? It had been half a month since General Kashubal had failed the mission, and it was as if they were waiting for someone. Felicia's expression darkened, and she began to suspect something. And he said that he thought they had killed the general to lure out the second prince. She folded her arms and frowned, saying that Zephyr was usually sent on such missions. They probably thought it would be the same this time. It was entirely possible. But why were they targeting him? Who was it anyway? Shutra said that whoever it was seemed to be extremely meticulous. He even self-destructed to avoid giving away any information about himself. Ishigurd remarked that these were very interesting stories, and Felicia indignantly exclaimed that they were actually serious. He replied that he was also serious, and she, sighing heavily, asked what brought him here in the first place. He told her that the Demon King was very interested in the ninth prince. He had become curious, and he came to see for himself. MC asked in surprise, "Did he come to see him?" The Swordmaster said the Demon King never did anything without a reason. If he did something unexpected at the audience ceremony, it was for a good reason. Now that he saw him in front of him, he had a rough idea of what the king was thinking. Shutra felt the atmosphere suddenly change, and the Swordmaster extended his hand, asking if he would like to exchange it for something. Everyone was surprised by this offer, and he clarified that he wasn't asking him to become his disciple, and he wasn't in that position. Besides, hadn't he already learned the beast god's martial arts? Felicia looked at Shutra in surprise and asked, since when had he learned this technique? But he ignored her and asked how he knew about it. The Swordmaster said that many types of energy were mixed in his body, in addition to the beast god's martial arts. He can't see exactly what each of them represents, but all these numerous forces do not repel, but on the contrary, accept each other to such an extent that the phrase mutual coexistence is suitable for them. In any case, he was interested in him. He would like to convey some of his observations to him. What would he say to that? MC stared at him in surprise and thought that this was a first. Apart from the Demon King Mitra, the Swordmaster had never offered his instructions first. He swallowed nervously and bowed to him, saying that he was asking for his instructions, and the man smiled. He placed his hands on his shoulders and said that he would teach him a way to control his aura and several techniques. How he applied them depended on his skill. His entire body was covered in a bright light. The Swordmaster said that they were beginning. He closed his eyes and focused on his aura. It was different from what it was when he mastered the art of hand-to-hand combat of the beast god. The aura felt like it was filling every corner of his body. The system began to inform him of the abilities he had acquired: Asura cultivation technique, Great Mountain and Wind God cultivation technique, and lightning. The Swordmaster smiled and said it was amazing. The speed with which he was achieving the technique was faster than he expected. MC was lifted into the air, two multicolored energies swirling around him, and this sight made his comrades uneasy. Ishigurd said that this couldn't be. Is such a thing even possible? The two energies intertwined, and the Asura cultivation technique and the beast god's melee combat art began to harmonize. His constitution and poison immunity levels increased. Upon reaching level 300 poison immunity, he can develop to 1000 poison immunity. He gained the constitution skill, Harmony. The S-rank beast god's melee combat art evolves. After that, A bright light emanating from his body shot a huge beam into the sky, and his aura turned snow white. This is how he obtained the SS rank martial art, Asura's Divine Strike. After that, he fell awkwardly, and Felicia worriedly asked the Swordmaster what happened, to which he replied that he only wanted to teach him the Asura cultivation technique, but he fused the beast god's hand-to-hand combat art and this technique into one. He did it unconsciously. Shutra caught his breath and thought that initially the only S-rank martial art in the game was the hero Locke's sword art, but now the beast god's hand-to-hand combat art had evolved into Asura's Divine Strike. Ishugard approached him and said that he was much greater than he imagined. MC wanted to say something, but he interrupted him and said that he would not pry anything out of him. He didn't need to explain. He was only interested in him. Did he give the technique a name? He took a deep breath and confidently told him that he would call it Asura's Divine Strike. He smiled contentedly and said that it was a simple name, but a good one. But as for what happened today, he should try to keep it a secret as long as he could. He was already attracting enough attention, so there was no point in increasing the gaze and suspicions of the royal court. He agreed with him that it would be for the best, and he said that they had finished what they came for. They just needed to collect everything, and they could rest. Felicia asked what they needed to collect, and he asked in response, was this their first time exploring the ruins? Shouldn't they quickly get their hands on it, all before the expedition arrived? They understood what he was talking about, and he drew his sword, saying that they would divide everything 3 ways. What were they planning to do with it? Felicia was confused, and Shutra scratched his head in confusion and told him that they would probably leave it in the forge of the Demon King's castle. Ishugard remarked that it wasn't a bad idea, but since they'd already obtained such excellent materials, how about entrusting them to his acquaintance? He personally vouched for his skill. Have they heard of Amida? MC was surprised, and Felicia said she'd never heard of him before, while her brother excitedly exclaimed that it was Amita Ignatia, the greatest blacksmith in the demon realm, who uses the final flame. Ishugard noted that he was aware of this, and he thought with a smile that of course he knew. Meeting him was a true hidden event in the game. Amita Ignatia, sometimes male, sometimes female, so there were rumors that he was a shape-shifting mage, and it was also said that Amita wasn't a single person, but a name passed down through a clan or group. Meeting Amit was incredibly lucky. Even he had only managed to meet him 3 times in 10 full playthroughs. The Swordmaster said it was good that he didn't have to explain all this. He would tell them where he had been living lately. He often changed his residence, so they should go to him as soon as they were ready. He was a hermit and didn't like meeting people, but if they mentioned his name, he would receive them. Shutra happily thanked him and thought that not only had he acquired a high-ranking martial art, but he had also learned the location of a great forge. As a result, he had become incredibly rich in such a short time. After resting, they thoroughly searched the treasury, and the next place they headed was the archive, which Felicia insisted they definitely had to look into. They slowly descended into the archive. Felicia was getting impatient and rushed forward, telling Shutra to hurry. He sneezed and said that there was too much dust here, and she asked with a smirk, does he mean that his curiosity is inferior to ordinary dust? Karak sighed and said that, ultimately, the prince had no interest in dwarven culture. They entered the archives. Felicia immediately began rummaging through the shelves and enthusiastically showed Delia one of the books, saying that the records were so well preserved. Dwarves are extremely meticulous. Mimi walked beside her, collecting the books she liked. Karak slept, and MC glanced at the girl and thought she was enjoying herself immensely. He stepped aside and looked around, wondering just how old this archive really was. There were even preserved records on some stone slabs. Conveniently, one of them fell off the shelf right in front of him, catching his eye. He immediately picked it up and looked at the image on the stone slab. It looks very familiar. On the right are Enkel and Enkidu, the 6 ancient dragons. Then on the opposite side is she, the same woman who told him to conquer everything, to bow to him. He was surprised and looked at her image, thinking, what is she doing here? This picture must be more than 1,000 years old. 4 people and 6 ancient dragons. What connection could there be between them to gather in one place? Suddenly, Green Wind's face appeared in front of him, asking why he was so serious. Her sudden appearance frightened him, and she flew away, telling him to follow her. It seems she did something worthy of praise. She took him to a pulpit on which lay a huge book, Records of the Ancient Dragons. He opened it and began to read. Each ancient dragon had a nickname that suited its character and traits. Enkidu, who possessed the power of destruction, was a tyrant. Enkel, beneficent to all, was a gentle mother, and Kaltain, fierce and furious, was a warrior. However, despite his ferocity, he was closer to ice than fire. A cold flame, a silent warrior who doesn't immediately draw his sword, but if he does, his rage will burn the world to ashes. He continued reading and noted that these entries seemed to be mostly about Kaltain, things like legends about him or the location of his lair. And then, he noticed a mark on the map on the Lake of the Sun, and wondered if the Elder Dragon's lair was really under the lake. He sighed and said with a smile that he now understood why the veterans couldn't find it. Green Wind asked discontentedly why he hadn't praised her yet. And then an idea occurred to Shutra. Wasn't the lake near where Amida lived? The one the Swordmaster had spoken of? He had definitely said that he was now near the Spider Forest. It's close to the Lycanthrope region, and he wanted to find Caitlin and Chris along the way, so it was perfect for him. Afterward, he patted Green Wind on the head, praising her, and thought about meeting Amida and receiving the weapon of the Elder Dragon, Kaltain. If all goes well, the next leg of the journey will be a whole gift set for him. They spent 4 days in Thunder Fortress. Felicia's zeal was not just impressive, it was astounding. Until the day of departure, she showed no fatigue while sitting in the archives. MC also spent most of the time there, searching for information about ancient dragons. But unfortunately, he couldn't find information about any other dragons except Kaltain. However, there was one small consolation. He used the promotion of the King's Knights and Karak became stronger. He asked, "Does he feel stronger now?" The orc examined his body, the aura around him, and confirmed it, then tried a few moves, and said with a smile that it seemed all their hard work had paid off. His rank was now barracks commander. The next morning, a new mission plan sent by Felicia arrived at the Demon King's castle. A message was also delivered stating that there was a high probability that General Kashubal's death itself was a trap designed to lure out Zephyr. Once business was concluded, they decided to set out, but Felicia was very curious about this fortress and shyly asked Shutra to look around a little more before leaving. There was still so much there that she hadn't seen, but he sternly refused her, the swordmaster saying that they must quickly find Amit before he disappeared. They didn't have time for that, so let her hop in the carriage. She only clicked her tongue in response, and when they finally sat down, he gave the signal to Karak and urged the horses on. He glanced out the window and thought that there had been many dangerous moments, but on this mission, they had gained even more than they had risked, and he was looking forward to seeing how Caitlin would react when she saw Asura's divine strike. He wished it would happen sooner. 3 days later, a new expeditionary force was formed to investigate the traces of those who hunted Zephyr, and Zephyr himself, as a directly involved party, took command. When he entered the archives, he found that stone slab with the image of ancient dragons in those 4. One of them is called Famine, the second Death, and the third War. But who is this woman, the 4th? One day in the volcanic lands, one of the knights came to the dragon to fight. He looked at her and told her to begin. It was the Night War. Time passed and Shutra was actively training. He fired a fire arrow forward, but it abruptly changed direction and crashed right into him. Karak, watching him, said he'd never seen such training in his life. Won't he hurt himself? Felicia said it was surprising, but he was fine. After receiving injuries, Shutra immediately used heal, and the system notified him that the skills level had increased, increasing the effectiveness of his mana control. He decided to take a short breath, then returned to training with a smile. Karak noted that this didn't look normal, and Felicia said that his magical abilities were improving, so they would leave him alone for now. They trained at night and traveled during the day. Their destination was the Spider Forest, where Amida Ignatia was located. To get there as quickly as possible, they crossed lycanthrope territory. Suddenly, the carriage stopped, and the lycanthropes blocked their way, saying that the passage was temporarily closed and that they should turn around. Karak asked what was going on, and the guard said it was official business for the lycanthrope royal family and that they had to leave the area. Felicia got out of the carriage and remarked that it was strange, so he pointed his baton at her and asked menacingly, "Can't they hear him? Turn them around." She walked up to him and told him to stop, to open the road immediately, as she needed to meet with the leader. The man got angry and pointed his finger at her, exclaiming, "Does she think she's a princess?" She confirmed this, and he asked in confusion, "What did she say?" She told him that she was a princess. After that, he had no choice but to let them through. They entered the camp, and the 2 guards were forced to sit with their hands raised as punishment. And Caitlin, seeing her friends, was very happy and ran up to them, asking what they were doing there. Felicia told her that she should be asking them, "What are they doing there? They even blocked the road." Caitlin didn't know what to say and started searching for words, and her brother decided to change the subject, telling Shutra that he heard he turned the Demon King's castle upside down. What was he doing there? He answered with a smile that he was just about to show them. Let them all come out for a minute. They moved to the training grounds, and there MC demonstrated his new abilities to them all in a fight with Caitlin. They quickly moved around the training field, delivering and parrying each other's attacks. Then at one point, they stopped and punched each other, causing energy to flare and a roar to be heard. The fight ended. Caitlin thought that this did not look like the hand-to-hand combat art of a beast god. She asked Shutra what it was, and he told her that it was Asura's divine strike. Felicia explained everything to them with a proud expression. It was a martial art that combined the hand-to-hand combat of the beast god with the Asura cultivation technique taught to him by the Sword Lord. Chris was very surprised and asked why the Sword Lord had taught him this at all. She said it was because Shutra was a genius, and Caitlin enthusiastically ran up to her brother and said it was simply amazing. Could she also learn this Asura divine strike? He replied that he hadn't created it as a structured technique, so he didn't think he could pass it on right now. Chris remarked that it was a martial art that even its creator couldn't pass on. It was simply absurd. He asked, "That's a compliment, right?" The man smiled and thought that his growth rate was truly frightening, and if he didn't want to fall behind, he'd have to train even harder. After that, they returned to camp, and Chris said that now that they saw how much Shutra had grown, they would talk about themselves too. But everything he said must remain a secret. The prisoner locked on the lowest floor of the Grey Tower had escaped. MC wondered, The Grey Tower is a prison where only the most brutal lycanthrope criminals are kept, and if he was imprisoned on the bottom floor, then it was definitely him. Chris confirmed his guess, saying that his name was Gerard Moonlight. He was their maternal uncle. Felicia was surprised and asked if they had such a relative. Chris said that Gerard was imprisoned in the Grey Tower 20 years ago, so they probably don't know. They say that he was originally a mighty warrior of the lycanthrope royal family. If he hadn't gone mad, the throne would have gone to him, not their mother. He endlessly strove for power, and, dissatisfied with the mere hand-to-hand combat of the beast god, he turned to various heretical methods, eventually losing his mind completely, and his madness itself became a catastrophe. Hundreds of lycanthropes sacrificed themselves just to subdue him. It was lucky that everything ended within the palace, so they were able to cover up the incident inside the country. Felicia asked, so he's saying that such a dangerous person is currently wandering around somewhere in the surrounding area? Caitlin said that according to the report, their uncle, that is, Gerard, headed east. Chris added that he had already lost half of his aura in the last battle, so they shouldn't worry too much. Felicia noted that the east was in the opposite direction from them, and Shutra asked if they knew where he ran off to. The guy answered him that they were still investigating, but it looked like he had help from the outside. And then MC thought, has that side quest to free Gerard, when playing as Zephyr, already started? That same night, Gerard attacked the lycanthrope camp. He lifted the only surviving guard by the neck and told him to speak if he wanted to live. Where's the moongrass? Shutra stared ahead in surprise, wondering what this place was. An incredibly beautiful girl appeared before him. He asked, is this really a conquest? What was happening, and where was he? At that moment, the girl pointed her finger at him, and suddenly a black hole appeared in space, sucking him in. Shutra realized what it was and asked, is this hunger? A moment later, he woke up in his bed, breathing heavily. He didn't understand what that black aura was. He had absolutely no idea what it was, but he felt a disturbing hostility. Why did the word hunger come to mind? He scratched his head, confused, when Karak burst in and reported a disaster. He was surprised and turned around, asking what had happened. Karak replied that an enemy had broken through. Someone with a long scar on his left cheek. He was releasing some kind of black energy and destroying soldiers with his bare hands. Shutra realized the long scar on his left cheek and the bare-handed fight. It was him, Gerard. Meanwhile, Chris and Caitlin went outside and saw numerous destroyed creatures. They cursed, and at that moment, Shutra arrived and shouted, Chris, Gerard should have fled east. What is he doing here? Chris was surprised by Shutra's quick arrival and couldn't answer him. Shutra shouted, stop holding back, let him speak as he is. What are they really doing here? Chris silently looked at the ground, unable to say anything. Caitlin suggested it was all because of the moongrass. Chris turned to her and cursed. Caitlin, she continued to explain that the moongrass was their original goal. They learned of Gerard's escape only later. The protagonist realized that the moongrass is a medicinal plant that blooms once every 100 years, one of the treasures of the lycanthropes, a consumable item with a monstrous restorative effect, so powerful that it can bring back to life even those on the brink of death. In the saga, it was an item obtained by defeating Chris and Caitlin. This means Gerard also came here for the moongrass to restore the lost half of his aura. Suddenly, they saw a bright beam of light rise straight up from the forest and reach the sky. Shutra turned and realized it was Felicia's magic. At that moment, bright, tiny beams of light scattered across the clearing. Felicia used a wall of fire, creating an incredible flame to defeat her opponent. She looked tired but continued to fight. Gerard pounced on her with his fists and she froze and cursed. But suddenly, the protagonist came to her aid and protected her with his own powers. He threw Gerard aside and asked, is she okay, Felicia? She was glad to see him and smiled. Gerard paused and decided to attack the guys again. Chris and Caitlin also came to the rescue and attacked the enemy from behind. He asked, are these Elaine Moonlight's children? Suddenly, the entire clearing lit up with a bright blue light from the use of magical powers, and Gerard was on the verge of attacking. Caitlin screamed that he was a traitor to Gerard and that he should surrender. She swung her fist at him, and Gerard replied that she truly did look like her mother. She looked up at him and froze, and Gerard took advantage of this moment to punch her. This sent Caitlin flying far to the side and hit her. Chris screamed her name in fear and turned to see what was happening to her. But at that moment, a beast with sharp fangs began to pounce on them from behind. The creature began to roar loudly, and Gerard uttered, withering. At that moment, he pounced on the guys, who were perplexed. The protagonist's mouth fell open in surprise, and he was already facing the monster, which continued to scream. Shutra paused and wondered if this dark energy was hunger. He continued to carefully examine everything that was happening and realized he was in Gerard's fist. He used these magical powers and attacked Chris, who flew aside with incredible force. He screamed loudly in pain and horror, and Shutra, noticing this, shouted at him. Chris! He completely didn't understand what was happening. Gerard had never been so strong. His body should have been exhausted from his long imprisonment. At that moment, Gerard asked, "Dare you get distracted right in front of me? What impudence!" Shutra gritted his teeth as his enemy grabbed his neck with his hand and began coughing. His whole body shook, and Gerard looked at him ominously and cast a desiccation spell. Shutra tried to fight him and not succumb to this spell, straining himself greatly. A moment later, there was a bright flash of light and an explosion. Gerard was attacked by the forces of Chris, who attacked him from behind. Shutra cried out loudly, and Gerard continued to use magic to destroy him. Chris shouted at him not to deceive himself. He was his opponent. He clenched his fist and continued to fight. While he dealt several blows to his opponent, everything around him glowed with bright magic. At that moment, Gerard looked at him with a smirk and asked, "He saw his uncle and didn't even say hello?" Chris shouted at him to shut up right now. Gerard, from the royal lycanthrope family, died 20 years ago. He's nothing more than an escaped prisoner. At that moment, the protagonist clenched his hand holding his golden sword and spoke, "Under the royal banner," and Chris was stunned by the bright golden glow. He didn't understand what this surge of inspiration he was feeling was. Was it Shutra's magic? Now power was overflowing his entire body. At that moment, Chris used these powers and struck his opponent. Gerard commented that his movements had suddenly changed. At that moment, Caitlin appeared behind him, also determined to destroy her opponent. She punched him in the back, and he froze in surprise and turned around with a sinister expression. But at that moment, Chris, who was standing to the side, screamed loudly, clenched his fist again, and prepared for battle. Several blows occurred a moment later, and Felicia, surprised, said that she couldn't see anything at all. What was going on here? Everything was indeed covered in dust from the sudden movements and blows, and Shutra, smiling, declared that Chris and Caitlin were winning. They continued to fight their uncle angrily. At that moment, Gerard declared that they were truly Elaine's children, so he no longer needed to hold back. A bright fiery light appeared in his eyes and his monster began to roar loudly. This creature rushed toward Caitlin and grabbed her head in its paws. She was frightened and unable to do anything, when suddenly several more blows occurred. He froze when he realized Caitlin was in danger, and the monster slammed her head into the ground. Chris turned around and shouted her name. Caitlin lay unconscious in a pool of her own blood, motionless. Chris screamed that it was a curse and that he would kill him. At that moment, the monster threw him aside with incredible force. So much so that he even broke a tree with his body. The monster continued to roar loudly and attack Chris, who collapsed, and at that moment the protagonist used his shield to protect his ally. The monster looked at him in surprise, and Shutra shouted, "Karak, we must call the knights." At that moment, Karak was near him, ready for battle. He grabbed his sharp weapon, and a moment later, Shutra used his magical powers and pounced on the enemy with his fists. He cast the spell, Giant Piston. The monster looked at his hand in surprise, and a moment later, began to roar. This was the secret of the beast god's hand-to-hand combat art. The protagonist struck the monster again, with a wild wolf strike. At this point, the monster finally attacked Shutra, who flew to the side. Karak didn't expect this outcome, and cried out in fear. "Prince!" The monster was completely enveloped in dark magical energy. It emanated from him, and he said it was not bad. Who would have thought he could rise after a wild wolf strike? Shutra was shaking violently, but still tried to stay on the ground. He loudly coughed up blood, and the master said that this time he would make sure to kill him completely. Shutra wasn't prepared for this, and muttered, "No," after which he pulled himself together and declared that it was now his turn. He used the secret art of hand-to-hand combat of the beast god, and the monster that took the blow directly cried out, "What?" It was the wild wolf strike with which the protagonist attacked the monster. The system reported that he had learned the secret art of hand-to-hand combat of the beast god and the wild wolf strike. He was determined to win, and kept saying it was time for him to feel it too. At that moment, the monster roared loudly in pain and blood spurted from its mouth. He couldn't understand how this freak knew the wild wolf's punch. Shutra watched his falling opponent, and used his explosive fist, then struck him in the jaw. The monster roared loudly, then swung its paws and cried out even louder. Shutra backed away slightly, and landing, said he was going to blow his head off. The monster grinned at him, and Shutra, dumbfounded, shouted, "White Suri." A moment later, he saw a shroud before him and didn't understand what had happened. The monster was gone. Had it really escaped? The system reported that his level had been increased several times. Shutra realized that at least he had solved the big problem for now. At that moment, he abruptly turned to Felicia and asked how Caitlin was feeling. Felicia replied that everything was bad. The wound was very serious, and she doubted it could be cured with magic. Shutra clutched his chest and began groaning in pain. Felicia noticed this and asked again, what was wrong? He realized that even though her external wounds had healed, the inside of her body was in complete disarray. And was this because she had forced herself to draw out her aura? Felicia still didn't understand what was happening and tensely asked, "Is he okay?" What was happening to him? Shutra's whole body was shaking, but he told her not to worry. He just needed some rest. He should let her take care of Caitlin instead. Chris approached them and asked him to give this to Caitlin and Shutra. Felicia turned around and asked again, "Chris, what is this?" His box contained the very same magical flower. It It was a moongrass, which could help. A moment later, Felicia used the moongrass's power to revive the unconscious Caitlin and Shutra. Felicia grabbed the flower in her hands and split it in two, each particle falling directly into the bodies of their allies. At that moment, Caitlin opened her mouth and sighed. She began to come to her senses and her wound began to glow. Felicia realized that light was emanating from their bodies, when suddenly, surprised, she looked at them rising into the sky. Felicia was frightened and asked, "Shutra?" Chris had never seen such a thing before, but he had heard the legend of the moongrass. The one called the primordial wolf king gathered the scattered lycanthropes into one place and founded a state. One day, he, a fierce, beautiful dragon, invaded their territory. After a desperate battle that lasted 7 days, the wolf king slew the red dragon and won. Apparently, because the battle had been going on for so long without stopping, the Wolf King's heart could no longer withstand it, and death was at his heels. At that moment, in despair, the Wolf King saw a snow-white flower and, relying on instinct, ate it. It was a flower infused with moonlight, which became the Wolf King's new heart. Having received a heart of moon essence, the Wolf King realized that his life was bound to moonlight and became known as Moonlight. People say he protected the kingdom for generations, but his was the first and last. For generations, lycanthropes ate the same flower, and yet none of them could face the moonlight like the Wolf King, and none gained a new heart. Such is the legend of the moongrass. But now everything was happening right before his eyes, and it was happening to Shutra, and he was of a different race. A bright beam of light pierced Shutra straight through the chest, and he continued to float above the ground. The system reported that the protagonist's settings had enhanced interactions and that their constitution was responding to the power of the moongrass. His entire body and eyes glowed with a bright magical light, and he now had 2 hearts, 2 points of reference. A moment later, he opened his eye. When he woke up, he found himself next to Caitlin, who was hugging him. He became very embarrassed and jumped up, asking, "Caitlin, what's going on? What's wrong?" They were lying on the same large bed, hugging each other, sleeping. When Shutra stood up, he looked toward the door. Suddenly, the queen's subordinates entered, and she came closer and said she hoped they slept well. She called him the 9th prince of Shutra and smiled. Shutra looked at her in surprise and was dumbfounded. He thought about how he'd seen that face many times in the game. It was the 4th queen, Elaine Moonlight. She is the queen of the lycanthropes, and also the biological mother of Chris and Caitlin. Elaine said she'd heard Chris and Caitlin survived thanks to him. How should she express her gratitude? He jumped out of bed and replied that it was nothing. He'd simply done the best he could. Elaine smiled and said there was no need to be modest. He'd done something worthy of praise. Shutra thanked her for these words, and Elaine said, well, thinking that was enough for small talk, so she'd get straight to the point. Shutra looked at her in surprise, and she said, 9th Prince Shutra, he wants to become the Demon King? She made him such an offer and extended her hand. Shutra's mouth dropped open in shock, and he asked, what do you mean? She replied that it seemed the thought hadn't even occurred to him. Well, given his position up until now, it was logical, but now his situation had changed, so he'd better think about it. Let him think about what could benefit him now. With these words, she left their room. After some time, Shutra realized he'd slept for 4 whole days, and Green Wind confirmed, yes sir, she knows for sure because she's been watching him. He replied that everything was clear and that she should clarify the situation. Green Wind replied that, as she'd already said, this was the villa of the royal family and the lycanthropes. They were lying in the same bed to enhance the healing effect. Shutra asked, what does healing mean? Green Wind asked, doesn't he remember using the moongrass? He was dumbfounded and asked, what? He used the moongrass? The system reported the protagonist's physique, special passive skill, and level 1 moon pill. He was surprised and asked himself, really? Come to think of it, a new power had been added to his existing aura. It was as if a second heart had appeared. He clutched his chest and felt magical powers. Green Wind added that Chris had said that the closer they were, the more their life forces would activate. If he tried to hold Caitlin's hand, he would understand what that meant. Shutra turned and looked at Caitlin and asked again, should he hold her hand? He did so immediately, and upon touching it, felt an incredible power and aura around him. Looking at his hand, he asked, is this it? Green Wind confirmed that it was. Thanks to the moongrass, the two of them were now connected. It would work the same way as their own. Sometime later, Chris met the protagonist in the hallway and reported that no one knew whether Gerard was alive or dead. There had been casualties during the investigation, but it seemed they had found Gerard's lower body and part of his upper body as well. But he would still search for him until he could be sure he was dead. Shutra replied that it was probably for the best. At that moment, Chris announced that he had heard his mother had proposed to him. Shutra realized he was referring to her question about whether he would become the Demon King. Chris noted that he was strong, but not incredibly strong. At most a Sylvan. He hadn't been able to close the gap with Prince Baikal in almost 10 years, and as for the difference between him and the second prince, a true monster, there was nothing to talk about. But Shutra, he could catch up with them both and become the Demon King. Shutra was stunned by this and said nothing. Chris said that, unlike him, he had the support of other races, and on top of that, he had the backing of the Sword Lord. Who knows? Maybe his achievements will accumulate, and even the current prisoners will be pardoned. Shutra asked in surprise. Prisoners? So that's why he hadn't seen a single one yet. What did they do to deserve their imprisonment? Chris replied that he was saying he had to do something right now. He was simply advising him to think about it, because there was a huge difference between thinking everything through and not thinking at all. Shutra looked away silently, pondering. When he looked out the window into the distance, he said, "Demon King." A moment later, a chariot passed through the forest, carrying the captain of the Bloody Wolf, Ludwig Monlight. Elaine sat next to him, explaining that she knew the Demon King, and that his every action had a reason. He wouldn't do something so spontaneous twice during an audience without reason. Apparently, he saw something in the Ninth Prince. After all, they were father and son, and frankly, he didn't really understand what was so special about it. Elaine chuckled and replied, how naive that was. Even if his son killed him and he inherited the throne, the Demon King would return. After all, that would mean a Demon King stronger than him had been born. That's just how he was. Of course, this might require unnecessary risks, but it would only be better for them if the Ninth Prince became the Demon King. Ludwig was surprised by this reaction and said that ultimately, the demon world is a world ruled by the strongest, where everything flows by the will of the strongest. Elaine chuckled and replied that this was exactly how it happened, and she looked out the window and said that it simultaneously upset and pleased her. Sometime later, night fell, and the squad captain shouted that they needed to find him. He was somewhere nearby. He couldn't have gone far in his condition. The monsters were looking for Gerard and suddenly found him sitting by a tree. They started shouting. Here, they found him. It seemed he had time to sort out his thoughts. Now would he accept their offer? Gerard woke up from the ground and used the drain skill. All the monsters scattered in different directions from such a bright wave. Gerard rose to his feet and said, okay, he agrees. It's time for them to start all over again. At that moment, his entire body was enveloped in dark magical forces, and he decided that this was precisely what he needed to do to reach a new ending. A few days later, Caitlin woke up in her bed. She clutched her heart and didn't understand what was happening. Because of Gerard, Chris returned to the main palace, and the next day they set off for the spider forest in search of Amit. After the twin bridges, they would have to hurry and proceed on foot. This was Robin, the lycanthrope boar whom Chris introduced as their guide. Shatra asked Robin what the spider forest was like. Had he even been there before? Robin replied that he had been there about 6 months ago, and his expectations were fully met. It was a peaceful place without animals or monsters. Shatra grinned and replied that he understood. For the first time in a long time, peace, but something was wrong. He didn't have time to fully consider this thought when they suddenly came across a clearing covered with numerous unknown skeletons. They were all dumbfounded with fear, and Robin turned around and asked what had happened. Shutra breathed a sigh of relief and said he knew it. He looked around the forest to see anything that could explain the situation. After a while, the sun rose and the guys found themselves in the forest. Green Wind said that she felt the power of the spirit of the forest's guardian. Shutra felt the green wind, and Green Wind said that it had weakened greatly. So the spirits of the forest were afraid that the guardians would disappear. Shatra asked Robin if there was a guardian in the spider forest. Robin replied that stories about him were passed down from generation to generation, but it was more of a legend about a huge spider living in the depths of the forest. Shatra thought about the depths of the forest and told Karma to go and inform the lycanthropes of what had happened. She immediately rushed to complete the tasks and shouted, okay. Green Wind looked up at the sky and sensed powerful magic in the depths of the forest. If this magic dissipated, something terrible would happen. When evening came, the guys lit a fire and set up a small camp in tents. Shatra said that the Green Wind said the spirit's power was weakened, but what would happen if the spirit disappeared? Felicia replied that a spirit could disappear in 2 ways. The first is if the spirit itself is destroyed, and the second is if what it was meant to protect is destroyed. That is, if the source of the spirit guardian disappears. The Green Wind may seem small, but she is of a fairly high rank, and if her source is destroyed, she will weaken but not disappear. But usually, spirits disappear along with their source. This most often happens with artificial spirit guardians found in dungeons or ruins. Shutra suggested that the reason the spirit guardian of the spider forest was weakened was because its source was damaged. Felicia noted that this was most likely true, but suddenly looked questioningly at the sky and asked to wait a second. She noted that the moon had turned a strange color. Suddenly, Caitlin arrived and screamed loudly. None of the guys understood what had come over her, and Shitra rushed to grab her. He asked, what is it, Caitlin? She must come to her senses immediately. Her eyes glowed with a bright magical light, and she looked ominous. Suddenly, a commotion began in the camp, and Shutra didn't understand what was happening. Karak, who had come out of the tent, began shouting, what's going on? It was him, Karak. Other guys started attacking him, and at that moment, Felicia cried out, a flash of light. She used magical powers to blind everyone around. Everyone was stunned, and she didn't understand what was happening. Her confidant replied that it was all because of the spirit of madness. She asked again, to the point of madness? It was Daphne, who pulled out her hands and cast a spell. At that moment, some of the guys began to lose their balance, Everyone fell to the ground, and Shutra, who had grabbed Caitlin's hands, realized that she had returned to normal. Carrick wondered, what was that all about? Daphne replied that they had driven away the spirits for now, but it wouldn't last long. They needed to find the cause. Suddenly, everyone's attention was drawn to the glowing green moon and a loud roar. Carrick asked what the noise was. Daphne realized the protection had been removed and that something was happening. Green Wind noted that it was an illusion. The spirit's power was so great that it was impossible to distinguish it from reality. Shutra noted that something was wrong and exclaimed, "Damn it." Several huge bears and monsters pounced on them. He shouted for everyone to get ready, because now they were going to fight. The protagonist cast an explosive fist spell and struck his opponent. At that moment, all the guys began to fight. Felicia also used her magical powers to protect her allies, who were on edge. Karak shouted in fear to the prince that there were too many of them. Shutra cursed and asked, "Can Green Wind go up and see what's going on?" She replied, "Okay," and then rushed off. As she approached, she saw a bright pillar of light and a huge giant. She was surprised and asked, "Is that really a giant?" The entire space was illuminated by a bright light, and Shutra asked, "What is it?" Karak shouted, "Just don't tell them they're advancing again." The monsters, surrounded by glowing magic, began to move in the other direction. Shutra watched them in surprise, and Mimi exclaimed that they were returning. She didn't understand why they were doing this, and Shutra suggested that they could transfer their spirits for now. At that moment, he noticed something amiss, and heard a strange sound. He turned around abruptly and asked, "Who's there?" The stranger hit Karak on the head, who cried out in pain before landing, and Shutra looked at the beast in surprise. It turned out to be a raccoon, and the raccoon turned around and asked, "What did he say? He actually called him a raccoon? Didn't he see how big he was?" The guys looked stunned at the raccoon, who said his name was Amida. He was the master protector of the final flame. Shutra asked again, "What?" He was Amida. Amida started screaming. What? He didn't like being a raccoon? Shutra replied that wasn't the point, and thought about how Amida's appearance had constantly changed throughout the saga, sometimes appearing as a person, sometimes as an animal. Amida started screaming angrily. "Who are they?" Shutra realized that this time it was a raccoon, and he didn't think he could get used to it. Shutra introduced himself, said his name, and said he was the 9th prince of the Demon King's palace. Felicia also introduced herself and said she was the 6th princess, and they were looking for him and the Swordmaster. She apologized for not recognizing him, and could he explain what was going on? Amida purred, then replied that he thought he could. His cheeks even turned pink. He said he'd started living in the center of the spider forest a few months ago, needing to gather materials for his work. He'd planned to stay for another 6 months and then move on. When a group of guys engulfed in purple death energy burst in, Shutra was surprised and asked, "Purple death energy?" Amida wondered, "Do they know him?" Shutra replied that they'd fought them while protecting the guardians of the Enger Plains. Amida guessed they probably made a living that way. Shutra asked, "So he protected the local guardian too?" He replied that he owed him a pretty penny, especially since lycanthropes regularly patrol this area. He figured out that if he put up a barrier and held out for a while, they'd sort it out. Shutra was surprised and asked, "What barrier?" Green Wind suggested that things would go faster if he looked at what she saw, sir. She remembered the bright beam of light and the giant in the forest, swinging his fist and destroying the magical wall. Shutra gaped in shock, unable to comprehend what was happening. He reported that the barrier had broken, and Amida confirmed that there was only one left. The problem was that those who had been hunting for the last flame for so long had begun to unite. The moon had turned green, and the spirit in the forest was going crazy. It was all their doing. Daphne came closer and asked who they were, exactly. Amida replied that they used to be spirit guardians, but now they were spirits of nature who had gone mad. Apparently, they believed that if they absorbed the last flame, they could return to who they were in the past, before they lost their origin and lost their minds. Basically, they united with those guys in the purple energy, and no matter what they did, they were getting stronger. So the spirit guardian of the forest began drawing on the power of the world lines to strengthen the barrier. But as a result, it had recently merged with the world lines, and now they couldn't even escape. Felicia asked what would happen if the last flame went out. He replied that he didn't know because something like that had never happened before. Perhaps then the end of the world will come, as others say. Shutra tensed up and stood dumbfounded. Amida replied that because of this, they would have to help him. Shutra asked again, "Them?" Karak spoke up for Shutra and asked, "Doesn't he know there's no such thing as a free lunch?" Amida was surprised and asked, "What?" Karak replied, "Let him do one thing for each of them. He can do it, right?" Amida looked at him warily and asked, "What?" He started shouting. Does he even know what situation they're in? Doesn't he hear that this is an unprecedented crisis, where the last flame could go out? Karak asked again. Maybe it would just go out, and nothing would happen. Who knows? They were risking their lives too, so he should think about it. Amida became very angry, clenched his teeth in anger, and began to shake. Finally he exclaimed, "Fine, he'll do it. Let them follow him." Karak laughed, and replied that he should better keep his promise. Green Wind added that she shouldn't forget about her either. The next day, he explained the situation to those who had been unconscious the entire time. Caitlin and Sarah were shocked and horrified by what they'd done, because things had only gotten worse compared to when they sent Karma. He sent Robin back to inform the lycanthropes and request reinforcements. In the end, They were left alone in the forest and gathered in a circle. Amita commented that the enemy's current pattern of action could be divided into two main phases. In the first phase, the maddened monsters, the beasts that drove them mad, attack the barrier. That's right, hordes of madmen are trying to weaken the barrier, and to their knowledge, due to their hidden ferocity, the monsters are easily influenced by the spirit of madness, so they'd better come up with countermeasures. Sarah responded in surprise that everything was clear to her, and Amita continued to explain that then comes the second phase, when the barrier is knocked down and a white giant appears and destroys it. This thing is mad guardians combined into one. This powerful monster is even worse than the guys with the energy of purple death. It will deliberately open a breach in the barrier and direct the first wave of attackers to one point, and they will deal with them. If you remove the phase when the barrier weakens, the giant will not be able to destroy the barrier. He says this because he's been measuring their strength for the last few days while they were destroying the barrier. If the barrier holds until morning, they'll retreat. In a day, they will restore the barriers and repeat everything. If they hold out for just 2 days, they can win. At that moment, Caitlin decided to hug the raccoon and grabbed him right in her arms. He blushed and remained silent, after which Karak whispered that he was imagining things or that Amita liked it for some reason. Shutra asked again. Amita has a weakness for women, Felicia pointed it out, but didn't he mean 2 days with reinforcements? He answered no, there was a more self-sufficient reason. At the center of the last voyage, the weapon he had made was being charged, and when it was finished, they would be able to deal with the white giant. After some time, night fell, and the guys climbed up to the structure. Karak looked at the weapon in his hands and declared that it was Amita's weapon. How he had been waiting for this. Daphne had said that if you put it on your head, it would ward off spirit madness. Caitlin accepted this and thanked her. After some time, they heard a loud noise coming from the forest. A dark spot was visible in the forest, and Shutra realized they were coming. Indeed, a multitude of monsters and giants were approaching them, roaring loudly. Shutra shouted for everyone to get to their positions. They couldn't let them break through here. They had 2 days. They had to hold out the entire time. With these words, he prepared for battle and clenched his fists. A moment later, the monsters began to roar even louder and pounce on the guys. Felicia rose up and, using her staff, struck the opponents directly with magic. She exhaled with relief and remembered Amita's words. Once she understood the power of all things, she should try using the staff he had given her. Then she would be able to use even more powerful magic than now. She concentrated and exclaimed, "Flame!" A bright stream of fiery flame pierced several monsters standing in its path, and a moment later, a bright explosion occurred. Shutra remarked that this was simply excellent. Now let her leave everything to them. He used his explosive fist skill and struck the approaching monsters, who began screaming loudly. All the guys fought equally, and Sarah, enraged, shouted, "How dare they?" Caitlin shouted that she was doing well, and at that moment, Karak was dumbfounded with horror. He slammed his weapon into the ground, sending bright beams of light piercing the entire area. He expressed surprise and said that this was no joke, the weapon Amita had given them. The battle continued in this manner, and Amita, watching from afar, said that they were not bad. He asked Daphne if the prince's name was Shutra. She answered yes, and Amita noted that his equipment needed improvement, but if they survived, he would do him at least one thing. A moment later, many monsters were destroyed and lay unconscious on the ground. Amita shouted that a white giant would soon appear, and everyone should approach the barrier. Shutra shouted back, "Good," after which the barrier closed over the guys, protecting them. Suddenly, a bright beam of light illuminated the entire area, and the boys were surprised. A huge giant appeared in front of them, and Shutra smiled and said, "So that's what he's like. He's incredibly huge in real life." At that moment, the giant began to pound their protective barrier to destroy it. Karak was dumbfounded and realized the giant could kill them in one fell swoop. Amita told them not to worry, because the barrier wouldn't collapse. They just needed to wait for it to disappear. The giant continued pounding the barrier without stopping. The boys waited in silence. Suddenly, Shutra decided to wait, because something was wrong. Everything wasn't like yesterday. Felicia asked tensely, "What's wrong?" He replied that there was no blue aura yesterday. Indeed, the blue aura was spreading everywhere, making the barrier easier to destroy. A moment later, cracks appeared in the barrier, and Felicia screamed that the barrier had cracked. Amita was dumbfounded and realized that this couldn't be happening. It was the power of death. A moment later, the barrier was completely destroyed, and the boys didn't know what to do. Shutra cried out, "They must run now," and the giant continued to pursue them. First, he hit Shutra, who was thrown to the side and landed on the stairs. He pulled out his shield, and Felicia screamed in fear, "Shutra." Karak was also worried about the prince, who was in terrible shape and realized that this was very bad. One more blow, and it would be the end for him. Suddenly, Karak shouted, "Let everyone stop and watch this." They saw a flying ship above them, and Shutra asked, "Is this really what he thinks it is? The only captain that sails the sky is the sword of the dark elves that cuts through the heavens." Felicia cried out with joy that it was her brother who had actually come to their aid. His name was Sylvan, and he cried out, "Load now!" The ship hit the giant, who rolled back a little and looked around questioningly. The ship passed through this creature and was approaching the boys to help. Felicia watched in surprise and asked, "Sylvan?" A moment later, the giant was shattered into tiny pieces. The ship landed, and the boys looked around, stunned. A multitude of droplets from the giant's fluids began to spread across the clearing. he realized that fragments of the white giant were falling. One of the fragments began to rise, but he didn't understand what it was. A new being emerged from these droplets, and Amita confirmed that each piece was a spirit guardian. They had gone mad and fallen into ruins, but they were definitely natural spirits. Well done, everyone. And that was probably all. Suddenly, the moon glowed a bright blue, and Shutra realized the illusion had disappeared. The moon returned to normal, but suddenly he saw a multitude of giants appear, and Amata asked, "Who are they?" The blow was supposed to end it all. Shutra realized he sensed a special energy. A purple aura appeared before them, and they all became frightened. Shutra asked himself, what is this incredible purple energy of death? Had he really been holding on to his power until now? At that moment, a terrifying monster that emerged from the energy began to roar loudly and attack them. Felicia turned around and shouted at Daphne to take Amita and go to the forest temple. She shouted back, "Okay, your majesty." Shutra shouted for everyone to prepare for battle. The second round begins. At that moment, Felicia rose into the air and began to pounce on the monster from above, helping all her allies. One of the giants folded his arms in front of him, looking confident. Caitlin realized something was wrong. Shutra told her to be careful, because he didn't know what it was, but he looked like a leader. She then decided to go scout, but Shutra told her not to, and suggested they just end everything in one fell swoop. He offered her his hand, and Caitlin asked, "What is this?" He had become so gallant. She grabbed his hand and he replied, "This is the base." When they grabbed each other's hands, a bright, radiating energy appeared between them, and they grew stronger. The giant looked at them questioningly, and they both said, "Okay." Then they begin. A moment later, they pounced on the giants from different sides, and the creature was dumbfounded. They began to fight, and at that moment, the other giants began attacking the guys. Caitlin screamed that she would take this giant and he would deal with the purple ones. He shouted, "Are you sure she can handle this alone?" Caitlin yelled at him not to worry about it. At that moment, the guys continued fighting, and Caitlin realized that Shutra was circulating their aura, so she could also use Asura's divine strike. At that moment, she approached the monster and shouted that she could easily handle it herself. Her arms were enveloped in the giant's magical powers, and he began swinging her and slamming her into the ground. Shutra saw this, and turning around, shouted her name, when suddenly another giant was aimed at him. He immediately pulled out his shield and exclaimed that they were freaks. Stop clinging to him, and tell them to back off already. With one swing, he destroyed several approaching giants, and the system announced that his level had increased, now reaching 25. He was surprised and dumbfounded. He had finally reached that level. At this level, hidden skills are unlocked. The system reported that he had learned the special absolute movement control level 1, as well as the Earthquake Awakening skill, Destruction Wave. He also learned the White Suri Einkel Awakening skill, Absolute Territory. Shutra thought this meant the end. At that moment, a bright glow began to emanate from his shield, and he used a special absolute move. His magical light spread across all the approaching giants and destroyed them with absolute territory. The blue giant was also stunned and didn't understand what was happening. Shutra understood that he had sensed his own power, so this is what the White Suri Awakening skill, Absolute Territory, was like. He was using it for the first time, but he thought he understood how it worked. This place was completely his territory. At that moment, all the remaining giants were enchanted by his magical powers and were unable to escape. One of them, the blue one, cried out in pain, and Shutra extended his hand and told them to die right now. The giant fell to the ground and was unable to rise, when suddenly a bright green wind appeared and engulfed all the giants' bodies. After a while, when the wind stopped, Shutra was left alone. He suddenly lost his strength and began to fall to his knees. Shutra passed out and said he didn't think his aura consumption would be so high. He was completely exhausted. Suddenly, he looked up and noticed the blue giant still standing before him, surprised. The giant, too, was weak, but still standing. Shutra cursed, confused as to how he'd survived such a blow. At that moment, the giant suddenly spread its arms and began attacking the protagonist with magical powers. The protagonist was stunned and realized he couldn't move. A moment later, a bright flash of light erupted in the forest, and a huge column of dust rose. The giant was enveloped in this dust, and Caitlin came to his aid and repelled the attack. Shutra was surprised by her appearance, and she screamed for him to accept her aura. She offered him her hand and shouted to hurry, as they didn't have time. Shutra immediately agreed and took her hand, after which incredible power began to emanate from them, and Shutra realized they could sense Caitlin's aura and that his aura was replenishing. At that moment, the giant didn't stand idly by and pounced on them from above. The guys managed to back away to avoid the blow, and Shutra frowned and realized, okay, this amount will be enough. His eyes glowed bright red, and he was aiming for the next kill. This time, he would definitely finish this giant. He swung his arm and pounced on the giant, using the Negator skill, a special mana from above, Destructive Explosion. When this skill was tested, everything flew apart over a long distance. A bright red glow appeared right in the giant's chest, from which dark magical powers emanated and began to spread throughout the giant's body. A moment later, a loud roar erupted right on the battlefield, and Shutra watched in surprise. A second later, the giant was destroyed throughout the land. Caitlin didn't understand what this insanely powerful technique was. Shutra fell to the ground again and lay unconscious. Felicia and Karak were terrified for him and began to approach him to help. Suddenly, Felicia saw a magical line to her side and was surprised. She screamed, "No, Shutra must be more careful." Shutra lay unconscious and didn't hear anything while this monster pounced on him, when suddenly Sylvan came to his aid and kicked the monster. Felicia was delighted by this, and he shouted to his subordinates to destroy them. They shouted, "Yes, Captain." The guys rushed to help with joyful expressions on their faces. After some time, Shutra woke up and found himself in a room on a bed. He got up and asked if he had lost consciousness again. Was he starting to get used to this? They were in the ship's cabin, and Caitlin asked how he felt and how he was doing. Felicia asked again, why did he get up? He needs to rest now. Shutra replied that he was fine and asked Caitlin how she was feeling. She told him not to worry, and that she was perfectly fine too. Sylvan approached them and announced that the ninth prince had woken up. Shutra turned to look at him in surprise. Felicia smirked and told him to introduce himself, as this was her twin brother. Sylvan said that he was the prince who roamed the skies. Sylvan. He was also the benefactor who had saved him yesterday. Shutra smiled and realized that he was calling himself a benefactor out loud. He was grateful, but how did he end up here? Felicia approached him and said that when she stayed at the lycanthrope village, she had contacted him, just checking in and telling him what was going on, but she didn't think he would come. Sylvan replied that he couldn't sit idly by if his beloved little sister could be in danger, but this was quite impressive. He had heard a lot about him, but honestly, he hadn't expected him to be so good. He's very strong, Shutra. He was surprised when he heard praise directed at him, and Sylvan told him he should be proud of himself because after all, he, Sylvan, was the one who sent him. Felicia asked again, what was he talking about? He had already been recognized by the Lord of Swords. He shouted, "What? Lord of Swords? What do you mean?" Shutra thought he was strange, but he had a keen eye. At that moment, Amida, who was sitting in Daphna's arms, approached them and said that it was good that everything was alright. Shutra was surprised to see him, and Amida said that thanks to him, they were able to protect the last flame and the guardian spirit, and as he had promised, he would make him equipment. Shutra thanked him for this. And Amita said that first there was something they needed to do. Shutra asked again, what? Amita told him to follow him, because the last flame wanted to meet the ninth prince. A moment later, Amita told them all to concentrate and mind their manners. The last flame sees everything. They approached a huge, tall building, and stood in bewilderment. When they entered, they were amazed by the incredible beauty inside. A huge tree grew right in the center of the building. They were greeted by a girl who said she was very pleased to see them. Her name was Capran. She was the spirit guardian of the spider forest. Then he asked again, what? Is this the little spirit guardian of the spider forest? Green Wind replied that it was a child, not the main body, but something like a vessel. Judging by its appearance, the main body is a young spirit guardian. And apparently the giant spider from the legend is the previous spirit guardian. He didn't show up at yesterday's battle, probably because he was young and lacked the strength to fight. Shutra understood. The previous guardian. But they don't say that spirit guardians have children. Amita said that they would go further only with the prince. The rest would wait for them here. The guys replied, okay. Shutra turned to Green Wind and told her to go out. She replied that her name is Green Wind, not whatever he calls her. He told her to stay and talk to the spirit guardian, and she asked, what? He replied, yes, such an opportunity doesn't come every day. The guardian smiled into her eyes, and Green Wind, surprised, replied, okay. At that moment, Amita became angry with the wait and shouted, ninth prince, is he coming? Shutra shouted, yes, he's already coming. A moment later, they were inside the building, and Amita sat on Shutra's shoulder. They approached a huge gate, and Amita told them not to make a mistake and to proceed with caution. Shutra smiled and replied, okay, after which they slightly closed the door and entered the room containing the bowl with the emanating aura. Shutra was surprised by this and asked, is this really what he thinks it is? Amita said that now he needs to approach the flame and place it in this hand. Shutra was surprised. What? Amita told him not to be afraid, because this is an unusual flame. Shutra did as Amita instructed and placed his hand on the flame, then froze in surprise. A strong wind blew around him, and he couldn't understand what was happening. Where was he? An unknown being appeared next to him and said they had finally met. He was stunned, and it turned out to be the Knight of Conquest standing before him. The girl extended her hand to him, and he asked, is she the last flame? The Knight of Conquest replied, his eyes filled with confusion. Does he know who the Knight of Conquest is? Shutra replied that he didn't understand what was going on at all, and she smiled and replied that it was interesting. After which, more magical forces appeared around Shutra. She spoke of conquest, war, death, famine, the four horsemen of the apocalypse. They are the horsemen of the end, those who thirst for the destruction of the world and hasten the end of days. But he is a little, or rather, he is very different from this. It's so much so that she can't even understand why he is a knight of conquest. The horsemen of the apocalypse thirst for death, and it's not that they become horsemen and then thirst for destruction. Rather, such people are chosen from the start. But not only does he not desire death, he is almost uninfluenced. Usually, the horsemen of the apocalypse are strongly influenced by the four beings who choose them, since they act on behalf of the power and will of these beings. They are influenced by them and try to hasten the end of the world. But Conquest doesn't particularly try to conquer him. In fact, she begins to wonder if this is what he wants to bring about. He was surprised and dumbfounded, and the knight asked, "So what does he want to do?" While the horseman of death continues to strive for the end of the world, what does he wish for? Shutra was surprised by this question and asked himself again, what does he want? When he recalled his previous life, he decided that he probably wanted to return to his world. But if we talk about what he wants in the world he now finds himself in, he remembered all his loved ones who said kind and pleasant words to him, and he lowered his gaze and realized that he wants to stop the slaughter of the lycanthropes. He wants to end this slaughter. He remembered taking Caitlin's hand as she led him. He wants to change the future in which all his loved ones are destroyed. Therefore he wants to protect them all. And the Knight of Conquest answered, "Very well. The Knight of Conquest is born with the destiny of a king who must conquer everything and subjugate it, and she knows the simplest and most perfect way to fulfill his wish. Let him tell her if he will become the Demon King." At that moment, Shatra paused and looked at the goddess. "Okay, because really, all he wants is to change the ending of this game." He replied that everything was fine, and he would become the Demon King. The Knight of Conquest smiled, and something around Shutra changed. She replied that the Knight of Conquest does not crave the end of the world. No, the King of Conquest. She would pray for his wish to come true. She approached his face and took his chin in her hands. He studied the divine power of level 1, the embodiment of flame, and an alliance was formed with the last flame, the status of the alliance being a lasting alliance. His level was raised, and he was returned to that room. When he looked at his hands, he was surprised, and Amida asked, "What's so attractive about him? Let him follow him." The last flame ordered him to be equipped again. In the very forest, a secret orchard, Amida reported that they were low on materials. They found themselves near a table with a map on it, and Shutra, looking at it, asked again, "Materials?" Amida replied that if he went north, there would be a place called the Lake of the Sun. Monsters with metallic bodies lived there, and he needed to catch several of them. Shutra asked again, "Wouldn't dragon skins and bones be enough?" Amida shouted that these were the main ingredients for crafting equipment, and they needed many different materials. They would need a lot to replace all the equipment, so he had to contribute everything he could. Did he understand? Shutra was surprised and asked again, "Wait, isn't he the greatest blacksmith? He doesn't even have the materials?" Amida asked again, "What's with that expression? He didn't want new armor?" Shutra confidently replied that he did, and Amida shouted, "So why was he standing there? He should go." Shutra, frightened, replied that he understood his order. Meanwhile, the magical ship flew over the forest. Karak asked if such creatures really lived in the Lake of the Sun. Sylvan confirmed that yes, the most famous was the callus, its weakness being divine power. It was made entirely of metal, and this metal was a rare material used as a natural water-repellent agent. Karak shouted that he really did know everything. Sylvan laughed at his words and asked, "Didn't he say that? He was a prince who roamed the skies." Felicia grinned and replied, "What a coincidence. She needed to go to the Lake of the Sun anyway." Caitlin was surprised and asked, "Why?" Felicia replied that the ruin exploration map she'd sent to the Demon King's palace had a map to the Lake of the Sun. She'd have to go there sooner or later anyway, so it would only save time, and that would be even better. Caitlin was surprised and replied, "A ruin exploration map. She can't wait to see it." Meanwhile, the protagonist looked at the special system that had appeared in front of him, along with Green Wind. He asked, how did he manage to accumulate so many points and skills? They should keep some of this and distribute the rest evenly. Suddenly, he learned that, indeed, when he reached level 25, the Royal Knights also leveled up. The system reported that his level had been raised, increasing the number of potential recognized knights from 2 to 3. Summoning efficiency had been improved, and he could summon members of the Royal Guard once every 3 days. He thought this was not bad. What he liked most was the ability to add another. Ideally, it would be great if Caitlin or Felicia joined, but that would probably be difficult. Suddenly, he heard her address him and say he smelled different. He asked again, what was she talking about? She replied that it didn't smell like Caprang. Was it really the scent of the last flame? He was dumbfounded, and Green Wind screamed, "A gentleman who smells like another spirit is disgusting." She blew a strong wind at him, causing Shutra to grit his teeth. Karak turned and asked what had happened. He smiled and replied that he didn't know. Sylvan reported that they were almost there, the Lake of the Sun. He looked down and was surprised by what was happening. A huge monster was attacking them directly from the lake. The creature began to roar loudly and opened its mouth with sharp fangs. Sylvan realized it was a sea serpent and exclaimed so. He didn't understand what a creature that could only be found in the middle of the ocean was doing here. At that moment, he exclaimed that it was dangerous to stay here and they needed to get further away. His subordinate shouted back that he understood everything and would do everything now, when suddenly, Shatra asked them to wait. Sylvan looked at him questioningly, and Shatra remarked that there was no need to do that. He would deal with him now. He drew his weapon and placed his hand on Caitlin's shoulder, who asked what was going on. He apologized to her, and a magical aura appeared around her. He exclaimed that he was right there, but before he could finish his sentence, Caitlin told him to stop. Shutra jumped straight down toward the monster, and the creature opened its mouth. Shutra cast the dragon's blood spell, while the monster roared loudly. Bright golden rays of light began to emanate from his magic sword, and he realized it was happening just in time. He needed a test subject like this monster. He used his special ultimate magic, and everything around him began to glow with his magical powers. He then cast Dragonbane and struck the creature. Sometime later, they reached the shore of the Lake of the Sun. The ship landed on the shore of this lake, and Caitlin started shouting that this was too much, Shutra. She wasn't his aura battery. He scratched his head and apologized, and Caitlin said that given the circumstances, she understood, but in the future he should warn her before taking her aura. He replied that it was fine, and Felicia asked them to be quiet. There was a flock of cultists. Sylvan decided, okay, time to have some fun. At that moment, the protagonist tried to stop him, telling him to wait a second. Cultists looked like they were made entirely of metal, but in fact, the metal wasn't all over their bodies, only on the surface. So it was best for them to concentrate their attacks around the creature's mouth. This monster was weak to cold, so ice magic was also a good way to defeat it. Sylvan smiled and replied that he knew, but he had a more effective way. At that moment, he used his aura and cast a spell, Aura Blade. It'll cut through anything. No matter how strong their armor, it's nothing to it. With these words, he raised his sword and everyone around him was stunned by the sight. Felicia gritted her teeth in bewilderment and asked, seriously? After that, she rejoiced at how cool her brother was. Then maybe they should leave the hunt for cultists to him? She really wanted to see that. Sylvan blushed and said, sure, let her leave the tests to her older brother. After all, he can deal with all of them, even alone. At that moment, he pounced on the monster, which began to roar loudly. All the guys watched the battle unfolding in anticipation. Shutra asked if it was okay that they had dumped everything on him. Felicia told him not to worry, he could handle it. They should go have dinner and rest for now. They had a lot to do tomorrow. Carrick noted that he almost felt sorry for the fifth prince, but at that moment, Sylvan was destroying each of the monsters with incredible ease. He laughed loudly and shouted that he would cut them to pieces. After a while, Sylvan, with a smile on his face, shouted, are they seeing this? Here are the corpses of cultists. He noted that even if they attacked him in a herd, he would be no match for the Prince of Heaven. All the guys were happy with this outcome, and Felicia said, okay, they should collect medals. They collected everything Amita asked for, so they should move on. After a while, a special magical helmet appeared on their heads. Caitlin was surprised and asked what it was. Felicia replied that it was a spell that allowed them to breathe underwater during underwater exploration. Karak was surprised and said, wow. At that moment, Felicia turned around and asked with a smile, well, is everyone ready? It's time for them to have fun exploring the ruins. She tied her hair in a ponytail and all the guys rushed into the depths of the reservoir. The guys were navigating a special map, and suddenly the protagonist paused, turned around and waved to the guys. He pointed toward the gorge, and when they swam into it, they were able to exhale in the space where there was air. Karak was surprised that there was such a place under the lake. Felicia asked how he found the exit. He replied that he simply felt it there. Sylvan said that he would go first, and Felicia should take charge of navigation. She replied no, Shooter was good at navigation and he should go first. Sylvan should guard the rear. Sylvan turned and looked surprised. What, the rear? Felicia, inspired, replied, yes. He was the strongest and therefore would protect them from behind. Sylvan asked again, yes? Well, of course, that was a wise strategy. At that moment, he drew his swords and shouted for everyone to relax, because he would take charge of the rear. All the guys grinned and looked back at him, and Felicia, with a serious expression, told everyone to move on. She went first, and Shutra asked her to wait, saying this place was in worse condition than the Thunderbane Fortress, abandoned hundreds of years ago. She replied yes. It looked like this lair hadn't functioned for at least 1,000 years. Greenwild turned to her master and asked him to look at it. He noticed something odd, and Greenwild noted something written on the wall. There were indeed some drawings on the wall, and Shutra wondered what they were. Felicia noted that she had never seen such letters. The system reported that they had studied the writing of a fallen level 1 race. The protagonist was stunned and realized they were writers. And at that moment, Felicia noticed this, and he said, 10,000 years ago, the end of the world happened. 6 pillars of magic. They couldn't protect them. It seemed like nothing but negativity, but he wasn't sure. At that moment, Felicia became frightened and asked again, what? How did he understand them? He looked at his magic hand questioningly and suddenly saw a bright beam of light emanating from afar. Everyone paid attention and Felicia looked at him questioningly and asked where he was going. Shutra began to walk toward the bright light and froze, then realized that this was where it was. As he got closer, he saw a magical cloak floating in the air, shining brightly. It was the equipment of a fierce cultine.